Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is the Town of Somers Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The date is December 18th, 2018. Denise, would you please take the roll?
Ms. DiPolito?
Present.
Mr. Gio?
Here.
Mr. Hardin?
Here.
Mr. Newman?
Here.
Mr. Santoroni?
Here.
Chairman Canestra?
Here.
Thank you.
I'd request everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Two quick notes here. A couple of our applications are going to be removed from the agenda. The application of Carol Miller has been permanently withdrawn at the request of the applicant. So that item is off the agenda. That's item number 1. Additionally, item number 5, that of Janet Lupinacci, at the request of the applicant, has been carried over to next month's meeting. So we're going to go right into item number 2 on the agenda, that of Earthstat Biddle Properties. This is a carryover application from last month. This is an application for an area variance for more than the number of pole signs allowed located in a neighborhood shopping district at 325 Route 100 Somers. At the last meeting, the board had requested some additional documents of the applicant, which we have received. Hi, sir, could you just give us your name and your standing with the applicant, please?
Yes, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Andy Albrecht, and I am the Vice President and Director of Management and Construction for Earthstat Biddle Properties.
Thank you. Could you maybe just briefly describe your application so everybody here in the audience knows what we're talking about here, and just maybe review or go over some of the new documents and things you've provided to us?
Sorry about that. Good evening. Welcome back, I guess. As you may recall from the last meeting, I came before you with an application for a zoning variance for the professional building located across the way at Somers Town Center. At the time, we were proposing 4 new signs. One, which was a wall sign that would replace an existing wall sign. A second was a pylon sign situated out along Route 202 in between the building and the retaining wall, the curb of Route 202. The third being a small directory in the plant beds at the rear of the building, actually, the base of the ramp to the upper level, and then the entry for the lower level tenants in back as a wayfinding sign. And then the fourth was what would be kind of a monument sign or pylon sign in one of the plant beds within the shopping center itself, to allow for people transiting through the shopping center to see the building, identify it, and the tenants within, and be able to turn in and park for that building.
And you provided mock-ups on the site, blacked out signs, so that we could go and see them. I think all the board members have visited the site to review all of those mock-ups. So that's appreciated that you did that. So
Yeah,
you can get an idea of what you're looking for here.
Yes, we found from the last meeting that just having the dimensions on the signs themselves, or on the handouts, was a little deceiving in really understanding the scale of the signs. So we had these built to scale so you could see, and painted black, which would be the predominant color.
Yeah, it was very hard to understand in the last meeting exactly what was being proposed, so this is much clearer now. Also, you provided pictures of each facade of the building as it is currently, so we can see all of the signage that's on there. Of course, most of it is, not within code at this point in time.
Absolutely, and that's one of the main reasons why we're here, is to clean up the kind of the mess that everybody agrees it is. So, if you would turn to the first item in your handout, which is what I've put up on the board next to the site plan, is a blow up of the professional building in the top right corner of our site. And you'll see I've identified numerically the numbers clockwise around, or the signs clockwise around the building. Number one actually coincides with the first, or the second page in your handout, which is a mock-up of the sign itself, or the board and the location. The new sign in its place with the white background and the black lettering per the Architectural Review Board.
And that sign on the building is really a replacement of an existing sign, isn't it?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We, if I'm not mistaken, I'll defer to Denise's expertise on this, but I believe we're allowed 2 wall signs on the building, and we're only putting back 1. Is that, okay, yeah. So that would take the place of that.
Because
All right.
if I'm
And then-
correct, the original site plan approval had only building signs, no pole signs at all.
Nothing at all, yeah, beyond.
2 wall signs,
Right.
that was part of the original agreement, okay.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, most people don't realize it's a separate tax parcel from, you know, a separate property from the actual shopping center itself. So those 2 rules, or they don't commingle, they don't share pylons. And then the bottom image in this, in page number 2, is what the sign will look like at night. We recognize that what we presented last time might have been a little too harsh, a little too white, if you will, especially at night. So what we've done is we've altered it so that there is white graphics. It's an opaque white vinyl graphic on the surface that you see in the daytime with the letters cut out. And then what that vinyl is mounted on is actually a honeycomb, sandwiched metal honeycomb panel that, when illuminated from within, allows only the light to pass through those honeycomb cells and not through the opaque vinyl. So you actually will see, now it only says tenant copy here in mock-up, but that's all you'll see is the white light of the letters themselves.
We're not going to see a big box.
Versus the white panel in your
Right.
face. Yeah. So moving, unless there's any questions on it, moving forward to sign number 2, which is the one located on 202. Again, similar kind of modifications. The size has remained the same, and the location has remained the same from our previous meeting. However, you do see the effect of the graphics changes with the white then disappearing at night.
So similar to the previous sign, only the letters would light up and not the whole sign.
Yeah, and with the anodized or the baked, you know, in black enamel paint, you know, for the metal on there, it'll virtually disappear at night. You know, aside from those names standing out.
Okay. I have some comments about this sign, but I want you to go through everything and then we'll discuss it.
Okay, no problem. And then moving around to the what would be, I guess, an east face of the building, southeast. Number 3 is really the internal directory or wayfinding sign located in the plant bed at the base of that ramp. Again, the location and the size haven't changed, but as it's a internally illuminated sign, the graphic changes apply here as well. And I think now that you've seen, actually, you know, been in the parking lot and see the scale of that next to the handrail going up the ramp, it really gives you an understanding of how small that sign is there and set back. You really don't notice it until you're out of your car, really, and approaching that end of the building. All right, and then finally sign number 4, which is again more of what we would call a wayfinding or an internal directory sign, if you will, but it does have the tenants' names on there. And I don't know, there may have still been some confusion from the first meeting, exactly the location and where you would be able to see this sign in the intersection of DeChico's and our property. And it was, I don't know if it was not located in the right spot on the last handout that we gave you, but it is located at the in the smallest bed closest to the building, so that people entering our property from the DeChico's parcel can actually look over to their left, identify that that's the parking area or the building that they want to go to, and be able to make that turn in. It won't be more in front of them where they're looking at the edge of the sign as previously thought. And once as well, the graphic change with the background.
So with this proposal, all other building signs, or other signs on the building, I should say, are going to be removed. You're going to leave, or you're proposing to leave, the town center at Somers Professional Building, the wording above the front doors?
Correct.
to remain.
The name of the building itself will remain. No tenant signage beyond the replacement wall sign will remain. So when you look at the four sides of the building, I think that was the last handout that we were that we had provided, is shots of the current building as it stands with the signs as they are today. And all of these will be removed except, as you referenced, Town Center at Somers Professional Building.
Now, the rental sign, that would be removed too, correct?
Correct.
And that would be never put on the building ever again for rental purposes?
If the building's full.
No, I'm just asking, will it ever be put back up there in the future, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
I would, well, the current sign, if we can have our own leasable space, panel as a blank on the signs for that vacancy that would be in there, I think we would be agreeable, and we could maybe even just come back at some point if it's bad and have a special permit for some kind of temporary sign advertising space. But that would be a temporary basis permit that we could do.
Okay.
I don't want to eliminate any possible future leasing potential, by
don't
never
wanna-
being able to put a leasing sign up again. I can't go down that road yet.
The code stipulates the kind of for sale and for rent and for.
That
lease
are allowable
signs
in this district.
That allow the signs, and we could work with, Andy and Wing about, Greg, about what can be done there.
Right. Is this outside of the historic district on that?
It is, it's not in historic district.
Because in the historic district, there are very strict restrictions, maybe a prohibition against for rent signs and for lease signs. So
Agreed, yeah.
And I just want to mention one thing that we did talk about at the Architectural Review Board meeting. Those numbers 268 don't mean anything in our system.
268.
Yeah,
There's 268 on the building, I
268
see.
on all the buildings, so that's,
Oh, okay.
it doesn't even show up in GPS, so we have to talk about removing those off the building
Okay.
as well.
all right, yeah, that'd be fine.
So Denise, would the sign over the door with the name of the building be considered a wall sign?
It really is kind of a directional sign, for lack of it, without arrows, because it tells you the name of the building. So that differentiates from the names of the tenants. The original site plan approval gave them wall signs with directories and that signage on the building.
We've experienced, the few tenants that are in there, excuse me, we've experienced situations where they actually identify themselves as being in Somerstown, the professional building, Somerstown Center. So we'd like to at least be able to keep that moniker there.
I mean, I certainly like that at night, only the letters will light up and not the whole box. I think that's a
Yeah.
big benefit.
Yeah.
The one thing that concerns me a little bit is the sign right on 202.
Yeah.
I was struck by how large that was when I went there. I don't know how the other members of the board felt looking at it, but I was surprised how big that sign was.
Right.
The other signs, maybe not so much, but that one really struck me as being big.
Well, we were trying to we were trying to balance kind of three factors here. The two biggest being there's a lot going on along that stretch of road, and a lot of things that you need to pay attention to. And not only the intersection and the traffic, but as you're passing through the intersection or you're approaching it, we need it to be big enough that people can safely, in a short period of time, glance over and see the number of people on there, or find the person that they're looking for, and be able to have time to, approach the intersection and make a safe turn in, and yet not be sticking out and outlandishly huge and overbearing. And that's why we have the scale we have it tucked down kind of off to the side on the lower level of the elevation in relation to the road. And then with the graphics at night, having it be very subtle so it's not a distraction then at the same time. So I think because of all the things going on along there and that road that you have to pay attention to, it's big enough that people should be able to see it, but it's small enough that it's not just this huge monolith along the road. I don't know how else to explain it, but we tried to find the middle on it, is all I can say.
What do the other members think about the size of that sign? Am I the only one who objects to its size?
I will say that I glanced at it today pulling out. I was not aware of these, the mock-up signs.
Yeah.
Until this afternoon when I was pulling out.
Oh,
I
okay.
was more concerned pulling out in a safely manner than actually looking at the sign.
There you go. I mean, being that it remains black, the body of it, it's very subdued. It really isn't that, loud and obnoxious in any way, shape, or form. I think the shape allows it to incorporate the name of the building and the nice graphic. This middle representation, you have to kind of keep in mind here. The middle image is a stark white panel, sign panel, overlaid on what is really a cloudy, overcast, sunset shot. It looks very bold in this image, but as the light fades, the white panel fades, and the lights come through it with the letters, and it comes more to the black image or the nighttime image.
I mean, even with the black mock-up.
It's just not.
Yeah, I mean, even with the
Yeah.
black mock-up, and black will make it seem as small as it possibly can. I still thought it was really large.
Well, we tried to get it obvious but not overbearing, and we also had to try and make the individual tenant sign panels, because we have 6 tenants in there. Their panel has to be large enough for their graphic to be readable. Otherwise, if the sign gets smaller, the panels get smaller, the tenant font gets smaller, and all of a sudden it becomes pointless. You end up with a sign there that you can only maybe read the name of the building, but you can't read the tenant name before you've driven past or you're paying attention to something else.
Would most people that were looking for a tenant of that building, I mean, I would imagine they had been directed that we're in the Somers Professional Building. That would be the key. I mean, driving by on the road, right, that would be the key identifier, I would think. Wouldn't be looking for a Dr. O'Hanlon sign.
I don't know. I don't know that I could answer that. I think sure maybe the first or the second time you got to really pay attention, that you go somewhere. But if you're a repeat customer or you're there for multiple occasions, you're going to know where to drive. That's not the thing. You want somebody's name to stand out on that sign, just like any other pylon sign or advertising for that business. It doesn't have to be their name. It could be, it doesn't have to be their actual name. It could be the name of their business, but you want people to be looking for that as well. It's
Because right now, that's...
not everybody's address is Somers Townsend, a professional building.
I mean, the face of that sign right now,
I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
yeah, that sign is listed as 72 inches high by 72. That's 6 feet by 6 feet. If you
Correct.
square it off, it's 36 square feet. Plus, it's sitting on a 4-foot pole. So this thing from the ground is 10 feet up, and I realize it sits low. I mean, even if you have, well, you have mocked up here 6 different tenants in the building. If we gave each tenant 1 foot of sign, that would be 3 feet. And this is a sign that's twice that big. I mean, I don't know how big the letters have to be for, you know, a directory, especially since there's directories in the lot. I just thought the sign was monstrous when I went by it. And I even think pulling out, I mean, I was pulling out of the Somerstown Shopping Center, and I'm looking and I'm just like, wow, that thing is like blocking, like, you know, just a lot of the view down the street. I don't know, it really struck me.
Well, we've really worked with the Architectural Review Board to get the right size that's not oversized and is fitting, but yet visible enough for people to find the tenant that they're looking for.
Right.
You know,
You're requesting a
by-
variance here, and we're supposed to try to approve the smallest variance possible. You know, and you are taking signs off the building, I understand that. There's still 1 directory sign in the building and some wording above the front door, but there are, you know, 3 pole signs, 3 directory signs basically proposed here.
Well, you have a lot of traffic moving in and out of and through the shopping center, and not one of these signs can be seen. I'm sorry, no 2 signs that we're proposing can be seen from any one location. And if you don't have a sign on that particular side of the building to catch somebody, as I explained in the last meeting, it's too late. They're already at the light, and they got to turn and make a decision to circle around and go back, or not. And so to be able to call out where the tenants are at the property and in this building is key to the success of the building. You know, these are professionals, you know, that's why it's a professional building. It's lawyers, and, you know, it's the dentist, it's the veterinarian that's going in, it's the architect. They want their name to be standing out on this, and not have to rely on people finding, you know, the Somerstown Center professional building necessarily as the sole name or identifier. And that's why it really needs to be the scale it is, so that the people can have a decent sized sign that they share with everybody else. It's uniform, it looks good then, and the building isn't cluttered with signs. And I think it'll go a long way to you know, benefiting this building and getting it leased up and rented.
But in our last meeting, we discussed the fact that it is the Somerstown professional building, and I think if someone wants to go to someone who's in the professional building, we want to make sure he can find the professional building. Mm-hmm. Once he's found the professional building, I think your job is done. I mean, it shouldn't be difficult within the building to find the person that you want to see.
Once you've identified and safely arrived at the building, you're right. It would be. It's not that big. It's a matter of calling out to the people driving by that, hey, this is where I'm located, and I think every tenant, you know, deserves the ability to have their name or their business identified when somebody's driving down the road or they're trying to be found.
See, if this was a retail establishment where you're selling things, or a coffee shop, I could understand a larger sign maybe arguing for it. But I don't think somebody's going to drive by and go, oh, I need to go to a CPA. Oh, I need to go to a veterinarian. I just don't see that as a spur-of-the-moment decision. That's something that you plan.
I'm not classifying it as a spur-of-the-moment,
because
spontaneous
you're talking
purchase.
about if somebody hits the sign and wants to turn in right away. To me, this sign is just way too big. That's my biggest problem with the application here, that I see. But I'm one of 6 members here right now, so we have to get the input from everybody.
Could I make a comment about
Ma'am, we'll go out to the audience, but first we want to hear from the applicant. We'll finish, and then we'll go out to the audience, and we'll hear from everybody who would like to speak. Okay. Other comments from the board? I don't know what the other members think. Are we looking at too many signs here? I mean, this building was originally approved with 2 building signs. They're coming back with 1 building sign. They have writing or lettering above the main door, and now they have 3 pole signs, one of which I think is very big. So I'm just wondering, are we going a step too far in the variance we're granting here?
Well, I will say that I think there's way too much signage, especially when it comes down to the tenants on the 202 side of the building. Again, as the chair mentioned, that he feels that's way too big. You know, in the sense of, as so many tenants, you know, I really don't think you need that many tenants on that particular sign. It would be just nice to have the town center professional building on that side, you know, in that location itself, if you could make it smaller.
So well, would you be proposing that we reduce the size of the name of the Somers Town
Actually,
Center
eliminate
professional building?
the tenants themselves. All the tenants and the sign itself in the sense of the town center professional building.
So
'Cause even-
remove all the tenants and just have Somers Town Center professional
I would go
building?
along with that, because even in the front of the existing sign, it just says Somers Town at Somers, okay, professional building. So I'd rather see that, which you have already proposed in the sign on 202 side, that I can go along with, versus all the tenants on there, because again, you have the tenants throughout the entire building. Inside the park, you know, on the building itself in the main entrance, and the 2 signs in the parking area.
I mean, across the street, there's a directory sign, you know, where they do list tenants, but the lettering is, you know, much more of a reasonable level than what you're proposing here.
You don't believe the panels, the sign panel size with the lettering is consistent with what's
I don't think it's
what's out there
consistent with
along
what's
202?
across the street, and I just think it's way too large. That's my problem with this. I mean, this sign, to me, has to be cut back. I mean, I'm a little concerned about all the pole signs on the property. You know, they're all illuminated.
I think
Well-
philosophically, we want to say that we want to help you and help the public find the building. That's the important thing. Once they find the building, you can have some sign at the door or just inside the door that says where you go to the office that you want to go to. But advertising who's in the building outside the building seems to be a stretch to me. I don't seem to
Well-
think it's important.
Yeah.
If I could speak, I'm Wing Biddle, I'm president of the company that owns the shopping center.
Sure.
I'm also the guy that's responsible and charged with keeping that building full of tenants. And I just want to explain to you that this is the Somers Town Professional Building. That really doesn't mean, what that means is that you've got professional people in there. And when we go to lease that building, and the people that are in there rely on advertising with signs so that people see that they're there. If we can't, that is why over the years it's morphed to have signs on that building of people's businesses. It's because there's a CPA who, that's the way he advertises. We've just signed a lease, or about to sign the lease with the vet who wants to come here. It's pretty sure if they can't have signage and be visible, that's going to go. There's an architect we've signed a lease for to go in that building. He's anticipating having some visibility with signage. There's the podiatrist. These are people that are not like Xerox or some amorphous company that it doesn't, you know, you go to the Somers Professional Building and they're there. These are people that they're like a retail business. They need visibility. They need a shingle. It's like if you drive all on these roads all around here, Allstate, all these other businesses, they all have the name of their business there. That's how they're advertising and they're bringing people in. If you look at the Boniello development across the street and you drive around there, you've got signs up on all the buildings with people's names who are behind those walls. They need this kind of signage for this kind of a tenant. These are not tenants that go into a big office building that don't need a shingle. That's the real driving force behind all this signage. We've spent
a vast amount of money over there trying to make this a nice shopping center. We're now focusing on this building, trying to bring it up to scale. To try to improve the neighborhood, to try to keep it leased. It's an old, tired building that we're putting a lot of money into, and we feel this is needed to keep the place leased. And then I look at it's great, the Chico's is coming, okay? We had a big role in that, in making that happen. And I look at the signs on the DeChico building, right? DeChico signs are about this high, the tall, the letters. So why does DeChico's need signage?
I don't think you can compare DeChico's here. Their building is massive compared to yours.
But it's
That's not really a good comparison.
what does building size determine what your signage is?
No, but the Chico sign, with the exception of a small part of the middle, which they were varied 6 inches for, did meet town code.
Look, I have no
24
problem with
inches
I think
high
it's
is town
wonderful.
code.
I think what they've built is great. I think the signage is on it is great. I'm just trying to point out that those are large letters. Why are they large letters? Because they need to be visible from the road. And that's what we've designed here with the Architectural Review Board and the distance. And there's a formula for how far you need to be before you can't see a sign. So that's why these letters have been designed to be this size. And they're not, the panel might be 2 feet, but the actual size of the letter is about 12 inches high or a little bit less. So
I'd rather you keep the lettering the same size and just reduce the surface area of the sign. Like I said, you have a 6x6 sign here. If we square it off, it's 36 square feet.
Okay.
I mean,
Well-
that's a big sign.
Well, okay, granted, okay, what's important to us is to have the height of the letters. That's what's important, so that you can see it. Otherwise, it's not worth the money to build the sign because you won't be able to see it.
Yeah.
So we would certainly be willing to say that as long as we could have 12-inch high letters, that sign could be redesigned to accommodate that. We just need a little bit of room in
I
between.
mean, if you did a 4x4 sign as opposed to a 6x6, I think I would be a lot more amicable to it.
20 square feet is great.
20
Right?
That would, yeah, 6, that would be 3, that would be about 4 or 5 inches in between each letter. I think we could probably make that work, because then that would probably work. We could have the
It would
letters.
still give you close to, I think, a foot size.
Yeah, that's
for
what we need.
each.
That's what we need,
But
so
you're
that-
just reducing the surface area around
Yeah.
it, and I think that might be more acceptable to me. Here again, I want to hear from the other board members. I mean, I just, to have a monstrous border around these letters,
Understood.
so, I mean, that might be something that
Okay.
would work.
Well, I'll let
Because,
you
I mean,
all-
you still have 6 panels. Like I said, if each panel is a foot, that's 3 feet. You have a foot for putting the name on top. That might be something.
I think that if that's what you all are comfortable with, I think we could live with that.
Is that something we might want to ask the applicant to design and show us?
I'm willing to compromise with that.
202
We'll go along with that.
sign you're talking about.
Yeah, the sign on 202 we're talking about. And I don't know if board members have comments about the other signs.
I mean, I think what struck me initially about the application was going from no approved pole signs to 3, which is a lot. I understand why you would want them, why the tenants would want them from every angle. There aren't too many even large retail shopping centers where any particular tenant would have 3 panels in 3 different locations. So it does, and we do need to vary this, so it does seem excessive in the number of signs.
Well, I would just make a comment that one of those signs is clearly a walking directory sign, the one going up the ramp in the back. I wouldn't really call that a pole sign. That's just simply a small directory sign, so that you know whether to go to the lower entrance or the upper entrance. It's like having a directory in an office park. And then I would direct you to our shopping center that we own, Somers Commons. That's got multiple internal directories all inside of it with names of where to go to various tenants. That's really what we're getting at for that sign as you come out of DeChico's, so that it's really internal to our property. You can't see it from the road. It's for our people that are inside shopping in our shopping center as they're leaving the plaza. They know what's in that building, and again, it's all about getting some advertising for those people that are working in that building.
Right, and in Somers Commons, I believe each, there's one directory monument sign and one panel sign per tenant. So again, this would exceed even that, because it's 3 here.
Well,
Two pylon signs.
yeah, there's.
I'm
yeah,
a
there's
tenant
like
in Somers
There's
Commons.
a big pylon, there's 2 other pylons.
Monuments.
All the tenants have signs over their storefronts, big signs, and then there are multiple directories inside the plaza. So here, these tenants in this building who are, I'll call them quasi-retail type professional service businesses, they don't have the luxury of having, well, some of them over time have taken it upon themselves, like the accountant, to put a sign up on the building so he's got visibility. We're trying to create a way that we can say to our tenants, look, the building doesn't look nice on the outside. We're not proud of it. The town's not proud of it. We want to spend a lot of money on these are very high quality signs. We want to make them look nice. We want to be able to paint the whole building and get it what we can all be proud of. But give us something so we can go to the tenants and say, sorry guys, the game's over. We're taking these things off the wall, but hey, we're going to build you these signs. We're going to put your names on these signs, and you're going to have, not the same visibility you had, but pretty decent visibility. So they don't leave. So they stay and pay rent, so we can afford to pay school taxes. That's what it all comes down to, from our point of view.
The main entrance to the building on the, I guess what you would call the front of the building, where there's the letters over the door. So when you enter that building, you can access any of the tenants from either the front or back?
Yes.
Yeah, and the front directory will have an up or down, lower, upper level direction outside, so you know when you enter which way to go.
And is there an elevator in that building?
No, sir, there's not. Internal stair. There's the internal stair at the front, and then just either the ramp or the door to the lower level in the back. That's correct.
So it seems like we're requesting the applicant maybe redesign the sign on 202 to a more of a 4x4 sign. And is there any other requests of the applicant or anything else we want to see? Any other issues that anyone has right now with the applicant before we go to the audience?
I think my only question, and it's just with regard to your picture number 3, where you have the internal directory sign.
Yes.
What is that gray box pole sign there? What is that?
That's a postal box.
That's
It's
the
the post office box,
Okay, I
yeah.
couldn't see clearly
Yeah, the
from the
mailbox,
picture.
yeah. You just see the back side, you see the postman side of it versus the pigeonholes on the other side.
And could we just request, depending upon your deliberations and what you hear from the public, but we're willing, if you're willing to approve that smaller size sign, we're willing to accept that. I'd rather try to get this over so we can get going with this project. We've been working on it for many, many months, and I don't know if you really need to see another rendering. We can live with it.
I mean, if it's just a size issue with the same design, maybe we can approve it with that condition that you fulfill that. Obviously you have to fulfill the condition, or
Of course.
the sign could be
Of
forced
course.
to come
Of
down.
course.
Just
And
keep that in mind.
Of course, and we'd be willing to agree that, we would, obviously, we're gonna have to come get a permit for that sign. The building inspector, it's of the record of what size, and he wouldn't give us a permit until we complied with that sign
I mean, that might be a possibility. We'll have to see
We-
what the
we would
members say,
appreciate-
and see if there's any other modifications or anything else we might request, but.
Okay, we'd appreciate that.
I do have a question. I will say, I appreciate you removing the signs off of the side of the building on 202 side. Now, you have the foot care sign that's inside the building. Even though it's not in front of us, is anything gonna be done with that? Because to me, that's tacky, very, very tacky.
Every wall sign or tenant sign that you see
off.
on the building is being removed.
Yeah, no, okay, but this is inside the window. Is there any way this is gonna be removed too?
Is that reflected in the picture you're looking at?
Yeah,
Which page is it? I'm
well,
sorry.
this is on the new stuff,
Oh, yes, all right.
It's a sign that shows through the window.
yeah, through the window. This is, it's not attached to the building, it's inside.
The second.
Yeah, we could work with that tenant to.
Please
to
tell the
have
tenant that you
removed.
can't, right.
Yeah.
We agree with you.
You know, signs in windows and neons in the windows.
That goes with
That's
raising the
defeating
bar that
purpose
we're
of-
talking about. here,
Obviously,
yeah.
that's in violation.
It doesn't really make you want to go get your feet taken care of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so technically that's considered a sign,
Yes, right, so that has to go out, right.
yeah.
That has to go out.
That's fine. We can,
That would
yeah,
be a
we don't, we're
That would
not
be a
opposed to
condition.
that at all. Yeah, we can make that happen.
Any other questions of the applicant or any other discussions before we go?
I don't.
Okay, before we go to audience, or just over here?
Just one thing. So if the directory sign, again, we have to vary this from 0 to 3 freestanding signs.
Okay.
So that creates some initial concern because that's a lot. I completely understand why.
Right.
If you were going to the back of the building, if you're going to enter into the back of the building, and that sign is there just to direct you whether to go upstairs or downstairs, that could be done inside the building. So if you entered on the lower level
can,
rather
but-
than walking up the ramp, you might walk up the stairs.
It can, but if I were going to see the podiatrist or somebody in there and I went to the wrong level and found out that I had to go back out or walk through the building and up and around because I didn't know to go up the ramp or down beforehand, I'd be a little bit miffed. I'd be sore.
No,
I mean, I think it just makes for an inconvenience for the person that doesn't know where they got to go until they get
Right,
into
on
the
that
building.
first visit, they might,
And then, yeah.
they might feel that. I'm just trying to find a way to not make this variance quite so large.
In terms of order of importance here, it goes, the sign on the road is most important, followed almost equally as important on that internal directory sign, and that as you pull in. This other sign is really a convenience sign for the convenience of people. If it wouldn't break our heart if you rejected that, quite frankly, it would really break our heart if we couldn't have the other two, because that's the goal of here. We trying to keep not having that directory sign is not going to block us from leasing the building. It's not having the other is the problematic ones.
I just think it's a little easier to approve, to vary for 2 than 3.
That's a consideration. Okay. Any other questions of the applicant before we go to the audience? No? Okay. Anybody here in the audience wish to speak in regard to this application? Ma'am, you wanted to? You have to come up to the microphone and give us your name. Just give us your name and address.
My name's Christy Fable, and I live in 19 Ann Rock Drive in Somers, New York. And I just wanted to say I support the business. I think they do need large signs, especially for the podiatrist patients. And the business brought up all the points I was going to make up, and that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else here wish to speak in regard to this application? Sir, if you could please just come up to the microphone and just give us your name and address.
My name's Charlie Burns, and I live at 13 Hyatt Lane in Somers. I just wanted to say that the directory sign for the ramp versus the stairs, don't let that go too easy, because as a patient going to the podiatrist, you want to walk as little as you can. I went through that process about a year or so ago, and I was really happy that there was a sign telling me this way versus that way, so I didn't have to do stairs. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody else here wish to speak in regard to this application? Okay. As the applicant, do you have any other questions or any other comments you'd like to make in regard to the application?
Not at this time, unless you have further questions. Director.
Okay. Any further questions of the applicant at this point in time? No. Do we want to discuss
Yes.
amongst the board here? Okay, thank you, sir.
Process.
Do we want to discuss here what we might propose as far as a resolution, as far as what we want to do? I mean, I think we're in agreement that the sign on 202, reduce the size to 4x4. It's a much more manageable I think, size of the sign, and I think they can still get in pretty substantial lettering for their tenants. I guess the question would be is, do we want to approve the application with that directory sign at the ramp there? I could personally go either way. I don't know what the other board members think. Tom, maybe you wanted to see that go?
Again, I want the business to succeed. I want the customers to have the best experience they can. Just in terms of a variance, it's a lot. It's a big move from none to 3. So I was just concerned about that. I don't disagree with the sign. I don't disagree that it might be useful. It's just a large variance.
Right, and I understand that, sure. What do the other members think?
I mean, I agree with Tom. It is a lot to go from none to 3, but I understand the purpose, and also with the ramp there, with the building to be handicap accessible, to not have someone who is handicapped go to stairs and then backing around. It alleviates that issue,
Right,
so I can rationalize it.
right. Umberto, what do you think about that sign?
No, I agree with him.
Okay, they think it's a reasonable additional sign to have.
Yes.
Arnie?
No, I will go along with the alteration to the sign in the front from 6x6 to 4x4. And the other signs, as you indicated to me in the last meeting, the one sign at the little island or peninsula, where that was for the traffic coming out, okay, that I understand. And the sign that is by the ramp, I feel it's more a necessity for people who are handicapped. So this way they know exactly which way they're going, especially if someone's in a wheelchair.
And Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll go along with that. That's pretty much the same thing. I had the comment about the sign over near the ramp, but this gentleman just made the point that thinking of the podiatrist, for instance, if you got some problems with your feet, I guess you don't want to spend some time wandering around the building. So if that sign helps, I guess I'd go along with it.
One more question. So all of the signs, so the color will be the same on all of them?
Yeah, they're all standardized with the white opaque vinyl as in the field, and then it's either I don't know if it's either bronze, a dark bronze, or a black honeycomb color for the letters that show through.
And would they be individual logos or just a uniform font?
Only a very basic, straightforward font is it, and it's
Same font on all the signs.
yes, all identical as far as the opaque white vinyl background for the field, and then the names, just the names.
I mean, I think the consistent font and that only the letters would be illuminated at night, I think, is a key element to this.
Yep.
We're not looking to have big light boxes,
Right.
lighting up the road.
ARB did set some stipulations.
Okay, so those would be adhered to, okay.
I think that helps.
Okay? All right. we
So I
ready?
think if we all agree, and that includes you, agree, we would approve this with the exceptions we've decided on tonight.
With the condition of
Yeah.
making that a 4x4. That's what it sounds like the board is gonna go.
Yes, and we would be willing, we could modify our rendering to have that sign be 4x4 and submit that to the building inspector, as Mr. Biddle pointed out.
To Denise.
Oh, yeah, all right.
Right,
Back
that would be good. Okay, that'd be great.
The real chief. Oh, yeah.
Okay, I think we're ready then to take a vote on this matter. I'll entertain a motion for the type of action.
I make a motion type 2?
Do we-
Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Can we have a motion in regard to the application?
Now I'd like to make a motion to grant the applicant with the condition that the sign on the 202 side be reduced down to a 4x4 sign.
Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations, your application is granted. With the conditions specified. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, next item on the agenda this evening is that of Mastrantoni, Brothers, Inc. This is an application for an area variance for a 2.5-foot rear yard setback for a new dwelling that replaced an existing one-family dwelling that burned down, located in an R10 district at 12 Hickory Road, Mayapack. Sir, if you could just give us your name and briefly describe the application?
Hi, my name's Paul Mastrantoni from Mastrantoni Brothers. I'm president. The house burnt down, and I bought the lot, and I got a permit to replace the house. And I called, and I went back and forth to the building inspector, and I did everything I was supposed to do. And he said, when you go out and replace the house, check, look at the foundation. I had my engineer look at it, and I called him, and I said, the foundation's compromised. They said, replace the foundation, replace everything. And I put it right back where they told me to put it. I put everything exactly how it was. And then,
But it was 2.5 feet too close to the property line.
but I had, I called the building inspector. I met with him 2 or 3 times, and,
Okay,
and I asked them what to do, and they told me exactly the same spot where it was.
right. And is the footprint consistent with what it was there before? I mean, the
Yeah,
foundation?
Yeah, it was, and we just, like I said, I was recommended that. If I was told to bring it back 2.5 feet, I had the room. I
Right.
was just told to put it back where it was, so I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. I just,
I understand.
and I wanted to get the CO, and I was told I'm in the wrong spot,
Okay,
and I'm here,
all right, I understand.
you know.
And as indicated, the previous home burnt down. Was it a two-story home?
I really don't know.
No.
The existing was 1.5.
1.5? Okay, and then this is a new two-story home? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Tommy, what do you think of this now? Is it,
The house is complete. I think the opportunity to make the house, the existing home was non-conforming. The existing home was non-conforming, 6 inches more so than the replacement home.
Okay.
And I think the opportunity to make the rebuild conforming was missed.
Right, could have
So-
put it in, but
Right.
I don't think we can have you move the house right now,
it would
2.5 feet, can we?
Extremely
That's
difficult.
probably not gonna work, I don't think.
You know,
Yeah.
if I was told, I had.
Okay, okay. So a C of O has not been issued on the house yet, except for this, or has it?
It's pending the decision of the
It's
board.
pending this decision. It meets all other qualifications to
Yes,
get a
it
C of O?
does, yes.
Okay, okay. Are you gonna be living in the home, or?
No, I sold it to I built the house and I sold it to a nice young couple coming up from Pleasantville there.
Okay,
She's,
okay.
wants to move in. She's
Right.
got one kid coming and one kid,
Okay, I understand.
one on the way.
Okay,
Put a little
She was trying to be last week.
okay.
You know,
All right, we'll see if we can make a decision tonight about this. Okay. Any other questions of the applicant at this point in time?
No, really, I mean, it's, everything is done, and everything's, been approved, hasn't it, Tom?
Yes, it has.
So we have
Okay.
no choice, really, I mean, that's it.
Okay. I'd like to go out to the audience. Does anybody here have any comments or questions or like to say anything to the board at this point in time? No? No audience comments? Okay. Sir, did you have anything else to add at this point in time?
No, I just, like I said, if I knew, I would have moved it. You know.
Any other questions of the applicant at this point in time? Anything else? Okay, so it's just 2.5, so you're looking for a variance of 2.5 feet on a rear yard setback for a new dwelling. Okay. Are we ready to vote on this application? Any more discussion amongst board members we have to have?
Not really, not
No.
me, anyway.
I don't see anything. Okay, I'll entertain a type of motion.
Make a motion type 2.
Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Hardin?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion as to whether we're going to grant the application?
I'll make a motion to grant the application for the rear setback of 2.5.
I'll second it.
Second, yeah, okay.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Hardin?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations, sir, your application is granted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. The next application is that of Gerardo and Consiglia Villani. This is an application for an area variance to construct driveway gates located in an R120 residential district at 2649 Route 35, Cantona. Sir, if you could just give us your name and briefly describe your application for us.
Would you like for me to put it on the board?
That would be great, yes. If you could pin that up, that way the camera can get it also. Okay, that's all right. There's two different ones. These are two different ones.
Two different ones.
Yeah, so they're two.
Thank you for having me this evening, Board.
Okay, so could you give us your name and,
Yes, Gerardo Villani, property owner at 2649 Amawalk Road,
Okay.
between Van Rensselaer and off Route 35.
okay. And could you briefly just describe your application for us?
Yes, we understand that the zoning for the fence height is 6 feet.
That's correct.
We'd like to ask for a variance as an 8-foot fence with a column starting at 4 feet and the last column at 9 feet.
Okay, so
We
you're
have-
starting off low and then
Yeah,
graduating them up.
it's 25 acres of property. There's no one in the rear of us for miles. We have our side neighbor, Mr. Martino. Martino's a former owner. He's at a distance, and we're gonna have children there, and we need privacy and security. So this is an effort for that. We're also gonna have the direct connect for the fire department in case there is some kind of emergency, that the gates will automatically open in case of an emergency hazard or some kind of condition.
Right, right. And it looks like the driveway gate is about halfway down
Yes.
the stone.
I know that the frontage is approximately 20 or 25 feet. It has to be with for zoning, so we're approximately 40 feet and then some.
And you said it starts off at 4 feet and rises to 9 by
Nine. The pillar does, but the gate itself is 8 feet.
the gate itself is 8
Yes,
feet tall?
yes.
Okay, okay.
The
It's gonna-
distance from the road, have you got the approval for the state? For the distance?
Sorry about that, sir?
Okay. The gate itself, or the stone wall?
Yes, no,
Okay.
it's not, it had, the road is within 10 feet of Route 35. With the state approval, we're beyond that. We're
Okay,
beyond
so
that.
you have approval from the state?
The state did not have to get involved in that, in the gate itself, because we're at the frontage enough feet from 35. so we-
Setback's large
Yes,
enough.
the setback is large enough, yes, sir.
How close is the closest neighbor's driveway? Sir, if you have a,
56 feet from the road.
Yeah.
That's all you have. 56.
Okay.
how close is the closest driveway to your driveway?
Approximately 800 feet,
Oh, okay.
800 to 1,000.
So this really sits all by itself? So
Absolutely.
We don't have a driveway 20 feet away from
No,
this or anything?
not at
like
all.
that? I wouldn't think so with this size property. Okay.
So the issue is the gate itself, the gate itself, you want to make it 2 feet higher than is allowed?
Yes, sir.
So Tom, is it only the gate or is it also the stone wall?
Gate, fences and walls are included in the maximum height.
Of 6 feet?
It's whether this board wants to consider that an actual stone wall or part of the driveway gate system.
And we made sure that it's not going to be some stone, it's going to be limestone and brick veneer. It's going to look pretty also for the neighborhood.
And that higher part of the stone
gonna
wall,
be
so to speak,
limestone.
sits behind the...
Very far back. The highest part is at least 60 feet from the 35.
So Tom, we're determining whether or not we're including the pillar.
Right,
the wall.
my interpretation would be that it's not considered a stone wall, but the board may think differently.
But we're definitely considering the gate itself.
Yes, as
Well,
a
if you
fence.
don't consider it a stone wall, then what is the height?
The variance would include the wall in addition to the gates if the board deems the wall separate from the gates as a fence, as a stone wall. It's just a portion of the gate, it's not even very large on either side of the,
Could I see that picture one more time? it looks like you have some like decorative stone lions or something on
Yes.
top. Okay. Are they at the taller part of the gate?
Yes,
Okay. Is that included in the height?
yes.
So this is the gate.
I think the lines aren't actually, it says +3.
Oh, they might be above that?
Oh, that's.
I'm mistaken, sir. It's 3 feet beyond the 9'6".
Right, it's 9'6", right, then we got 3 feet on
Yes.
top of that, okay. But once again, they sit in the back,
It's
further back.
So far back.
Yes,
Really
I don't know
out
how anybody would see that, right. Right.
Now, what were you saying about the gate automatically opening?
Well, by fire code,
Yeah.
there's a system where if there was a fire or an emergency,
mhm.
that the gates would be synced to open in case of emergency situation.
Now, in the sense of electric supply to it, will it have its own separate meter? Because the fact that if there's a structure fire, it just so happens that
Yes.
the breaker itself,
Yes, sir.
it will have its own separate
It's
meter.
gonna have, we have a generator, an automatic Generac system being installed for that purpose alone.
Okay. And you have a call box, I assume, outside someplace?
Yes, sir.
Somebody coming up to the gate that they could do a call box,
Yes,
right?
sir.
That's it's a standard driveway gate, okay.
Tom, if this were 6 feet tall, there would be no permit, to put up a gate, you'd need nothing
The
else. to
applicant
cover the
wouldn't be
front.
here before you.
I see.
Did you consider making it 6 feet tall?
Would I consider it?
Did you consider making it 6 feet to meet the code?
No, sir.
You want the height for the security, I assume?
Yes, sir.
For, it's harder, someone can't just look
Yes,
over
sir.
it.
We're gonna have small children on the property, and just for our sanity.
Sure.
It's just safer for them.
And how many feet, I think you said it before, how many feet away are you from the highway?
From the highway, over 45 feet.
It really,
I don't see any problem.
it really sits back. So. Any other questions of the applicant before we go to the audience?
No.
Okay. Anybody here wish to speak in regard to this application? No comments? No questions? Okay, sir, did you have anything additional you'd like to add or say
No, sir.
in regard to it? Any further discussion from the board in regard to this?
No.
Any no? No questions, no comments? Okay. Okay, I'll entertain type of action.
Type 2.
Second?
Steve Polito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
We probably should do a motion, and maybe we want to specify that the motion, we're approving the 8-foot actual gate itself and then the higher stone wall. Do we want to do that? I mean, is that, you think we should be covering that too, Tom? And
I think that would clean up the,
Just to make
the
it-
entire application.
absolutely very clear.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the board is objecting to either of those items. So maybe we should just have it in the resolution, so it's a nice, clear determination. Okay, do we have a motion in regard to this application?
Yes, I'll move that we accept the application, understanding that the gates are 8 feet high and that the stone wall is slightly higher.
Is 9'6" plus another 3 foot for the
Plus another.
for the lions.
Lions.
Right.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations, sir, your application's granted.
Thank you, board.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda this evening is that of Heritage Hills Sewage Works. This is an application for an area variance to install a 1,000-gallon capacity liquid propane tank below grade located in a DRD zoning district at 9 Heritage Hill, Somers. Is someone here to represent the applicant? Okay, hi. Thank you, sir. Could you please give us your name and your relationship to the applicant?
Yes, hi, my name is Roscoe Booker. I'm an engineer with Cedarwood Engineering. We're doing a upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant. Yeah, that's about it.
And could you describe for us what the need is for the tank and why this is occurring? Are you
So-
replacing a tank, putting in a new one? What are you doing here?
It's a new tank. The building is being renovated so that it's going to have propane heaters. There's no propane storage on site, and so the tank is being added for that.
How's the facility now run?
How's it
Yeah,
run?
how's it powered right now? Is it by electricity?
Oh, yeah, no, it's got electric service. This is just for heating, for the heating element inside the heaters.
So this is to heat the facility?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
It's not, is it like does it work also like as a backup generator for the facility or anything?
No, it does have a diesel generator, but it's not connected to any kind of, change so that it can run on propane or natural gas.
So this is just to do the heating system for the facility,
Yes.
and it's replacing an electric heating system?
Yes, yeah, existing
Okay.
electric.
Okay, because I know a lot of Heritage was built with electric heat throughout a lot of the facility.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And why did they change over from electric to propane?
It was just included in the design. I'm not sure the underlying movements for it, but
Probably a cost savings, I would imagine.
yeah, I would think that would be a large consideration, yes.
And this is going to be at the plant?
Yes, yep. The tank is going to be installed just adjacent to the building. It's probably about 20 foot away from the main building, installed underground.
Now, what is going to be surrounding the tank itself? Basically, what I'm concerned with, if the tank is, quarter full, and we've had a real wet, year like this year,
Yes.
I can see it popping up out of the ground.
Sometimes they float the tanks if they're not,
Yeah, this tank is anchored to a concrete slab underneath. It's been sized according to the empty weight of the tank and the buoyant force with the propane, excluding the water. It's going to be bedded in gravel, so it will be compacted and it should be all solid.
and this is a propane tank, obviously, not an oil tank, right?
Yes, yeah.
Because with oil, there's leakage problems and contamination, where propane, the
Yeah,
leakage
exactly.
problems aren't there.
Yeah, and it will go under pressure testing before it's fully permitted.
And Tom, are we okay with the location of this tank, where they're proposing it on the property? Any issue with location at all, or problems that you know of?
No.
Okay, no issues on that, okay. I think there was some indication that there were 6 gas heaters that this thing is going to be
Yes. Yeah.
firing, or, yeah.
Yeah. The throughout the main building.
And this facility provides water and sewer works for,
Actually, it is only wastewater treatment.
only
Yeah,
wastewater treatment?
the water treatment plant is a separate building and separate distribution system. But it's just wastewater.
This
for
is just
for the
wastewater,
community.
okay.
Yep.
Any other questions of the applicant, or any other issues we should discuss here?
Tom, what is it that requires this to come before us?
Can't bury a liquid propane storage tank in a groundwater protection overlay, according to town code.
Oh, it's because it's within the
Yes.
groundwater
Protection
loca.
overlay.
That was same with the Chico's, when we
Right,
approved
had
their
to do the
tank.
Same thing for
Yeah.
DeChico's.
And we've also often talked about that even if propane leaks, it dissipates through the air. There's-
dissipates,
It's
right.
not a groundwater or land contamination issue,
Right.
so, okay.
Tom, is this size tank, is this appropriate for what they're looking to do? Is there any smaller size that they could reduce to, or that wouldn't be recommended?
That'd be a question for the engineer, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, really, there would be an option of sizing down the tank, but really that would increase delivery to the site. This would allow the heaters to run for approximately about a month without being refilled in cold times like now. There would be an option of resizing the tank, but really at the
If the facility lost heat, what are the ramifications of that in the wintertime?
well, really, the new process is going to have pumps and piping running throughout that main building. if we were to lose heat and if temperatures were to plummet massively, there's always the risk of freezing pipes, which would cause, in this case, severe failure of the plant.
We could have a failing of the facility.
Yeah, yeah.
So in case of a disaster, maybe it is better to have
I
a
would-
larger,
I would think so,
tank
yeah.
there, just in case something happens where,
Yeah.
you know, trees come down or storms as we've had them in the past.
Exactly. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board? No? Okay, sir, any other comments that you had at this point in time?
No, just to say thank you very much to you guys and also to the building office. They've been very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Anybody here in the audience wish to speak in regard to this application? No? Okay. Do we want to entertain a motion for the type of action?
Type 2.
Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santaroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Can we have a motion as to whether we're going to grant the application?
I'll make a motion to grant the application.
Second?
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santaroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations, sir, your application is granted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is that of Kayla Choquette and David Potter. This is a carryover from the previous meeting. This is an application for a special exception use permit to construct an accessory apartment on the second floor of a barn, as well as an area variance because the barn is being constructed after 1992. This is located in an R80 residential district at 6 Anorak Drive, Somers. Sir, if you
evening,
could
Mr.
just
Chairman.
give us your name
Sure.
and, yes, and just briefly, I know you've been before us before, but if you could just briefly describe your application and any new documents presented, things like that.
Sure. Don Rossi from the firm of Hogan and Rossi in Brewster. And since our last meeting and consistent with the discussions that we had, we submitted a revised application for the special permit for the keeping of horses to cover both of the lots that are the subject of
Right,
the
you
application.
decided
Yeah,
to
we-
add the extra lot
Exactly.
as part of your application, right?
Correct.
Which
I
you're
think it was-
entitled to amend your application.
It was always intended, was always shown on the plan, but the technical deficiency of not having shown it on the application has been corrected. And accurately, we are seeking a special permit for the keeping of 6 horses on the property, which, on property meaning both, which would otherwise support 11 according to the code. A special permit for the accessory apartment that would be situated on the second floor of the barn, and 2 variances related to the accessory apartment, one of which is that it is being proposed in a building that was constructed after April of 1992, and also because it's proposed in the second floor of a barn, a mixed use with the keeping of domestic animals as defined in the code.
Right.
So we believe that what we've proposed, and you were all considering this before my involvement on it, is a special permit for keeping of horses that is entirely consistent with the code. Since the last meeting, there have been some additional letters of objection submitted that question the, I guess, the validity and the appropriateness of the 1 horse per acre limit and the ability to keep up to 11 horses on this, but it is what the code provision is, and I believe we meet the code in all respects. One of the key parts of this, in thinking of it so much over the last couple of months, is that this is a special permit use, as is the accessory apartment use. That's been determined by the town board in preparing the code as a use that is compatible with the residential district that this is situated in. It has insured against potential adverse impacts by including special conditions in the ordinance, which I believe the board is familiar with, and at any point I'll elaborate on any of this. I know you've heard it all. But in addition, and a very important part of this application is that the applicant has been willing to impose voluntary conditions on the overall use, which we believe really buttons this up to protect as much as possible against the type of adverse impacts that the objectors have raised before your board a number of times. Those are, again, I'll just run through the special conditions at this point. We've used the term farm in the application as simply the nomenclature that I'm used to using. This is not a farm in the sense that it is being operated for profit. This is a private farm. It's the keeping of horses as permitted. We have specified and will certainly agree to include in a resolution of approval, if you're so inclined, only horses owned or leased by the applicant will be kept on the property. It's very common in the horse business for owners of farms to lease horses. It's simply like a business use that renting out a room might be. Kayla may very well elect to lease a horse or two to ride for her own purposes. So that is, again, only her would be in control of the horses that are kept there.
Right.
No leasing of stalls to any member of the public. No riding lessons. No ability to lease a horse for an hour or for a day. No outdoor lighting, no outdoor loudspeakers. All manure and waste handling will be consistent with the Westchester County Code. Manure will be kept in a dumpster that's shown on the site plan adjacent to the barn. All consistent with the code, all feed will be kept in rodent-proof containers. All of those things are so critical to Kayla because she's going to be living in the house. So the concerns of the neighbors are multiplied, we believe, when looked at through her eyes. She's a veterinarian by practice, of very high regard locally. I think there are a couple of letters in the record to confirm that. All of the concerns related to ability of paddocks to accommodate this use, and odors and smells, and the upkeep and maintenance of the farm are things that are intimately important to her and a huge part of her investment in the property. Her concerns are the same as the neighbors. The application, kind of interestingly to me, without the accessory apartment, would be within all four corners of the code. In this case, the accessory apartment's being proposed in the barn, which, despite concerns that have been raised, is consistent with the New York State Building Code. It's not something that's going to present a danger to the person residing there. There are many references in the letters that have been submitted to studies with regard to potential adverse impacts, but I dare say that in our world, almost anything that's looked at, if it's going to be considered in excess, probably has some health problems. Peanut butter, for example. But her concern is real to ensure for the safety of her horses and for the occupants of the apartment, which, in addition to, or really, I think, frankly, without any real need, she is agreeing that it'll be occupied by either a family member or someone employed on the farm. Employment does not indicate a commercial use. Employment means a caretaker, potentially a couple, someone who would be on site to be able to assist in the care, maintenance of the property and the horses. So we think that the accessory apartment with that condition only supplements this and makes it a better application for your board to consider.
Is the applicant agreeing that not to rent the apartment out?
Yeah, yes.
I do want to be clear on that.
Unless to the extent that rent might be compensation for someone who's working on the farm.
Watching the horses.
Right. So that is something agreed to, and a very important aspect of it. The paddock areas, and we granted the areas shown on the map for the location of the paddocks are the ones that work best on this particular property. But they conform in all respects to the area requirements of the code. Paddock usage is not historic. The type of paddock usage that goes on here is not historic paddock use, which I interpret as where horses graze in paddocks for their food. That is not the way horses, especially expensive horses that are in the jumping disciplines, they don't depend on grazing in paddocks for feed. So when you see studies of 1 horse per acre, 2 horses per acre is what's necessary to sustain a horse, that relates to their feeding habits. These horses are fed in their stalls for the most part. They don't depend on grasses. There's no interest on Kayla's part to have, and Kayla's here, she's happy to supplement anything I say. 1, maybe 2 horses at a time is the most that would ever be kept in one of these paddocks. These horses are not typical farm animals. They get out into the paddocks to exercise some, to get some fresh air, but to have more than 1 or 2 would be simply unmanageable. If the board deems it necessary, we could add that as a condition. Kayla has no interest. The owner of the property, being the one who's operating the farm, is another built-in safeguard against a lot of potential abuses. She is going to rotate the use of these paddocks appropriately so that they do not become mud pits. She will have an interest in keeping them grassed. It's again, a built-in protection to have the owner and operator of the private farm there. So I think those things are kind of the essence of it. I don't want to take up too much time. Obviously, any questions you have from the submission, but I think this is something that, most importantly, fits into the special permit use, which is assumed to be a compatible use in this residential district, and the safeguards that are built in by the code provisions and the voluntary conditions, I think, speak very well for approving this application.
One of the items that you did mention in your most recent letter to us, that if one of the lots was sold, that the approval here,
Absolutely no question.
you'd have to come before us again for a renewal of new conditions, assuming we were to grant anything at this point.
That is clearly it.
So we're not going to approve this, then you sell a lot and,
No, not
and
at
the
all.
activities on, because this approval would be based, if it's granted, on the combined lot. That's what your application is for both
Correct.
lots, all
And that-
11 point whatever acres.
No, it's correct.
Just to
Good.
clarify,
That would be null and void, Don, right? The approval would be null and void.
Correct.
Null and
Correct.
void.
Null and void. So,
So
if you sold a lot, it would be null and
uncategorically.
void. That's a better terminology, yes. Thank you.
And it's very consistent with, as we've kind of learned over the years, that everyone thinks of a special permit as benefiting a piece of property, which it does, obviously, but it also burdens the property. And there is no question, included as a condition, and with no problem whatsoever.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any other questions of the applicant at this point in time, or any discussion we want to have amongst the board? We'll give you another opportunity.
Sure.
so I want- Anybody else here who wishes to speak in regard to this application?
Good evening, everybody. Michael Caruso for Barlow and Patricia Humphreys and George Azar. I'll be brief. I know the board has my letter, 2 letters. And I just want to point out that in my letters, the issues that I'm going to focus on tonight, I know there's a lot of people that probably want to speak, so like I said, I'll be very brief. The 2 new applications for area variances as identified in my transmittal, area variances are just fundamentally not the vehicle by which they can seek to vary special conditions. The ones in 17069 and 17070, it goes to housing domestic animals under 17069 and 17070 about accessory apartments being located in buildings being built before April 1st, 92. These are issues that can only be resolved in 2 ways: a use variance or seeking an amendment from the town board to your code. These are not bulk, scale, or physical conditions that can be varied by an area variance. So in the statement of use that was submitted by Ms. Spillane, items number 3 and 4 as they relate to the 2 applications for area variances, put simply, the board just doesn't have the jurisdiction to grant those applications. You can't vary those conditions. They're qualitative, they go to use. They don't go to size, dimension, and bulk. The only other thing I would drive home at this point was there was some discussion, and I know Don spoke to this quite a bit at the last meeting, so I won't go too heavily into it. The board was talking about keeping domesticated animals or keeping domestic animals, and there was a lot of discussion back and forth, I think good discussion about the code and whether it's outmoded and arcane
and whether it needs to be changed. Because there was a lot of discussion about whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense that dogs and cats could be in accessory structures, where obviously horses and larger animals cannot be. And it seemed as though there was a divergence in what could be feasibly accomplished and whether this code as written today makes sense. I would submit to this board that in all respects, Don was right. The code may be outmoded, and if it says that those prohibitions apply, they apply. And the only recourse for that is to amend the code, not to insert conditions that don't exist. I certainly wouldn't tell the board to do that, just the opposite. If the code has that prohibition for domestic animals and it's applied in the way that I suggested at the first meeting, the board's province is clear. Just apply the law as written, not as it should be written or as it could be written. The recourse is to comprehensively amend the code, and that's not this board's job. That's the town board's job. So those are really the 3 points I wanted to elaborate, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other questions of Mr. Caruso before we?
No.
Nope. Okay, all right, thank you, sir. I'll go out to the audience now. Anybody else wish to speak in regard to this application? Yes? Go, come
on. I'm Dominic Veltri. I live at 3 Anorak Drive. Mike covered a lot of ground, so I didn't go to law school, but I got a whole bunch of notes on your code, which basically says everything that Mike said. So I'm going to be very brief tonight because I've been here 3 times already. So, since early September, we received 5 different public hearing notices regarding 6 Anorak and now 8 Anorak Drive. Each time the ZBA applications and notices have been amended, expanded, the plans continue to evolve. During this whole time, the applicant, their engineer, and now their attorney have articulated many different things. For example, the first ZBA meeting in September, the notice said it was for a special exception use permit for an accessory apartment, then an area variance at the next meeting. Next, we moved to keeping a horse as a 6 Anorak Drive, and now we're looking at 2 variances, 2 special exception use permits, an administrative ruling of the town law, which was in Mr. Rossi's letter to the board. And we're looking to keep 6 horses on 2 parcels of land that don't meet the minimal requirements of section 170-69, 170-11, and 170-106 of our town code. Additionally, back in October, the town engineer indicated that this was a type 2 action and essentially indicated that no environmental review was required. I want to note for the record that the plans for 6 and 8 Anorak Drive were amended numerous times since early October, when we were told they were ready to pick up a permit, so I wonder how that happened. And as recently as within the past 2 weeks, and each time additional items were added to include things like a 3,000-gallon storage tank for water, storm water levelers, holding tanks, a septic field, 2 horse paddocks, and tree removals. Based on the requirements of Chapter 92-6 of the Town Code, which covers environmental quality reviews and types of actions, we believe this application sets forth a significant and permanent change in land use. It will have permanent and irreversible effects on the environment, and therefore should not be considered a type 2 action. During the October ZBA meeting, I outlined at least 8 items from our code that are detailed under section 92-6C that identifies this project at least as an unlisted action that should be reviewed by the planning board. We believe the probability of occurrence for many of these points in this section of the code and this application meet multiple requirements for it to be considered an unlisted action. It must therefore be submitted to the planning board and requires an environmental review before any determinations can be made by the zoning board. Under section 170-69 regarding the keeping of animals, we went through this at the first meeting. A special exception use permit may be granted. Doesn't say it has to be granted, and it doesn't say you must grant it. for the purposes of keeping domestic animals of a type or in excess of those specified in section 170-11. So the board has broad jurisdiction over this. And as antiquated as the code may seem, it is the code of Somers, and you do not have the jurisdiction to change it. You must apply it. New York State Code is wonderful, but we are governed by the code of the town of Somers. I also want to address the I'm trying to be brief. I'm going to blast through some of the stuff that Mike already covered. There are a lot of items that the applicant needs to address as part of 170-69. Many of the items have not been fully addressed. They have to attest to certain things. One of the items is no building shall be used for human habitation. Will be used to house domestic animals. This is a critical point in our code, and it was written for a reason. It may not exist in Bedford. It probably doesn't exist in North Salem or South Salem. Maybe New York State law doesn't want it, but somebody in Somers put it in the code for a reason. And if somebody wants to change it, maybe they need to go to the town board, as we've been told for the past 3 meetings. In general, the town board, the Board of Appeals may permit the keeping of large animals such as horses. However, the existing lot at 6 Anorak Drive is limited to less than 9 acres, and 8 Anorak Drive is limited to 3 acres. I'm sure the board will agree, based on your site visit, that the vast majority of the land on these 2 pieces of property is simply not usable due to steep slope, moderate steep slope, and extremely steep slope designations for the property on both parcels. Based on the plan submitted to the building department, the paddock area shown on the plan is less than 1 acre in total, with 2 paddocks. This is substantially less than and not in conformance with the generally accepted standards for the keeping of horses, which our code requires. The recommended industry standard is 1 to 1.5 acres per horse, which seems to be logical and is absolutely consistent with the way our code was written, any which way you read it. Usable land is the point that needs to be taken into consideration here, not the mere fact that the 2 parcels amount to 11.88 acres. Okay? Under special circumstances such as terrain, orientation, and the location of lots and residences, the Board of Appeals may allow more or less animals. Applying reasonable logic to this code section, most people would agree that this land, the lot, its proximity to multiple residences, and it being in an established residential neighborhood in general, do not support the intended use for the keeping of 6 horses. Since the applicant has not provided a comprehensive plan for the keeping of horses, and the thresholds outlined in this section of the code have not been satisfied, the application should be denied. Second, the application does not meet the minimal standards of the town code for keeping of domestic animals relative to accessory use per section 170-11. Accessory uses in animals. Under section D of that code, it says the applicant is seeking for a special exception use permit for 6 horses, which should not be allowed based on the usable property which is available for the intended use. It simply does not exist on these 2 parcels. So if you read that section of the code and that whole section about the terrain and the land use, I think a logical person who walks the property or in the area would say, this doesn't make sense. Additionally, as a point of reference, in that same section of the code, section A, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but for the past 3 meetings, it shows up in the minutes. Mr. Riley brought it up at the very first meeting and the second meeting about cats and dogs being horses and domestic animals, and maybe cats and dogs for residents of Somers would end up in front of the zoning board for a special use permit. That's not the case, okay? And then Mr. Rossi brought it up at the last meeting, brought up cats and dogs. Again, there is a very significant distinction between cats and dogs as pets in our code and domestic animals as horses and whatever else we want to call them. And the code clearly delineates a distinction between dogs and cats as household pets and domestic animals. The reason I bring this up is it continues to be misunderstood by many people here. Third, the application does not meet the minimal standards, nor does it conform with the guidelines provided in section 170-106, which is the standard for determination that this board must apply. The approving authority shall determine which application upon the merits and in conformity with the following standards and guides. The use shall be of such location, size, and character that in general it will be in harmony with and conform to the appropriate and orderly general development of the town. The town, our neighborhood, and specifically the location of this property within a groundwater protection overlay district and a residential R80 zone simply do not make sense for the keeping of horses. Not to mention the fact that at least 4 exceptions would have to be granted by this board if done correctly, and a comprehensive plan should be in front of the Environmental Review Board or the Planning Board before any of a determination could be conducted. Also, as the approving authority, your deliberation and determination shall be made in accordance with the comprehensive plan and design set forth in this chapter, promote health and general welfare, and provide adequate air and prevent overcrowding of land, facilitate adequate provisions of water and sewage, as one or more of the standards may apply in this particular use. Clearly, there are many aspects of this request that run contrary to this clause in the code. We provided numerous fact-based reasons at the previous ZBA meetings as to why the request is a major concern for our neighborhood, none of which were refuted by the applicant, their attorney, or their engineer. In fact, not once has the applicant provided any supporting information as to why their application will not have an adverse effect on any of the items we brought up. In addition, in section 106 of the code, substantial weight to the application should be given when it is found that as a fact that the maintenance of a particular use together with the improvements incidental thereto will not tend to depreciate the value of property in the neighborhood, and particularly existing dwellings, and that the use will not conflict with or impede the trend of type and character of dwellings or improvements under construction or reconstruction in the neighborhood and future dwellings, or improvements to which the neighborhood may reasonably lend itself in the foreseeable future. This is our code. I'm not making this up, I'm just reading it, right? Again, regarding these last 2 points in the town code, conjecture is all that we've heard at the last meetings. All right, Mr. Potter, one of the applicants, said because they're investing $500,000 in their property, that we should expect our property values to go up. He said, where is proof that our property values will increase? Not one of my information searches in the past few months have pointed me to any positive impact of introducing horses to an established residential neighborhood. In fact, almost all of my research points to health risks and the many overarching concerns we have. I have found nothing that says our property values will increase. And certainly shoehorning 6 horses on a piece of property, a piece of land, that arguably can't accommodate even one would be irresponsible. But let me share another tidbit with you. Most recently, the applicant had their realtor provide a property comparative analysis of a bunch of properties near horse properties. We were able to obtain it. It's in the public record. If read literally, it's very interesting. But if you read it and pay attention and analyze what's there, you're going to find some interesting stuff. It's not applicable, doesn't support this property, doesn't support this application. For example, it references a $27 million, 30-plus acre piece of property in Armonk. How does that have a bearing on a $550,000 piece of property in my neighborhood, where all the houses are selling at around that price? Other properties as well on the high end of the spectrum in Bedford, North and South Salem. Interestingly, though, we analyzed every one of the properties, and it was also 4 in Somers. And of the properties we researched, not one of them has seen an increase in property value. In fact, if you look at some of the history, one of them lost 18% in its value from when the people bought it to when the people sold it. But we'll share some of that with you in a moment. Additionally, the applicants referred to their property numerous times at the last ZBA meetings as a farm. Mr. Rossi said it again tonight, maybe wanted to correct himself. Farms are a business operation. At the very first meeting, one of my neighbors from Somers Chase, they asked if it was going to be a business operation. Everybody said no. So what's the proposed use? Is it simply to keeping of personal horses that have been retired? 2 that Ms. Choquette owns, 2 that her mother owns. What about the pony that we heard about? Is that a 5th horse? Might show up one of these days. What is really going to be happening on this property? We talk about a caretaker. He's not going to be paid, but he's not going to pay rent. That's part of a business. That's a transactional item. If it's not a farm and it's not a business, what is it? But if it is a farm and there is a transaction for a caretaker being compensated through rent, then our town code is very clear as to how we address farms and businesses. And this is a residential neighborhood. There is clearly no upside to this, and it will compromise the character of a well-established neighborhood. In closing, I would like to point out that during the last 3 ZBA meetings, we were counseled many times about the town code. We heard numerous times that by right, the applicant can develop their property as long as they follow the town code and their plans are approved. We were also told that if we felt the town code needed to be changed, we should submit requested changes to the town board and that the ZBA could only apply what is currently in the code. I asked this board to consider our rights as well. We have the privilege of owning homes in Somers, and this application significantly compromises our rights to this privilege and the benefits we derive from living in the town. We are not asking that the town code be amended. To the contrary, we feel the town code is very clear. We believe it simply needs to be applied objectively by this board and all the agents of the town. There are very logical reasons why this application should be denied. We have cited numerous deficiencies in meetings, in meeting the minimal standards set forth by the town code for the application to move forward. We've done that at the past 3 meetings. We'll continue to do that tonight. Additionally, we believe there are various determinations made in processing this application where the town code was not properly followed. The most compelling reason to deny the application, however, is if it is approved, then the town code would have been ignored by this board, and the board would irrevocably change our neighborhood, adversely impact our quality of life, and that of at least 39 homeowners, and negatively impact our property values.
Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to kind of wrap this up
I
pretty
will
soon
wrap it
because
up
there's a
in-
lot of people here that want to
I
speak.
will wrap it up in 15 seconds.
Okay, because I really want to
I
get to everybody
respectfully
tonight.
ask the board to read the letter I sent you dated December 5th, which I submitted to the board secretary. I also request that a petition that I'm going to hand to you for this, requesting that this application be denied, which was signed by 39 impacted property owners on Anorak Drive, Highview Terrace, Route 100, and 23 from Somers Chase, be put into the record for consideration by the board. And I would like it accurately recorded. Thank you, Mr.
You can give it
Chairman.
to our zoning board secretary, Denise. This board requests that all documents be submitted at least 10 days before a board meeting, so.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak in regard to this application? Yes, sir. Please give us your name and address. I'm going to also ask that future comments, normally we don't limit them, but for this evening, we're going to limit future comments to 3 minutes each. let's please stick with that because we'll be here till all hours of the evening. Sir, please give us your name and address.
George Azar, number 265, Route 100. I am not part of the Anna Rock subdivision, but I am adjacent to the property. I think most impacted, I think, from everything that's being changed upon it. Kind of hard to find room from Mike and Dominic up here to kind of say what I want to say. It's like I can't reiterate all day, like you said. But I think I'm just looking at some of the obvious things that I've been looking at since September. And some of them are the horses farms that are established within Somers already. Some of them are across from Reese Park, Mapac Avenue. And they are vast properties, and I understand that. Not every horse farm has that kind of equity or that kind of capital to maintain something like that, but they are vast. The area is, to start with, obviously, is that it's flat. This lot just appears to be something that's, looking at it on a map, on a flat, one-dimensional print, clearly doesn't give you the sight of what it looks like until you go out there and take a tour of the property.
Just so you know, the board has visited the property. Everybody has visited
since
and walked the
October,
property.
yes.
Yes.
And honestly, it's like if you're thinking of putting animals of horses or any kind of a farm on something that does slope, which most of it I think does slope towards my direction in my property. Environmentally speaking, it's like I do have a concern. Is it's something that could be life-causing? I don't know, but I know that right now it's been pleasing to be there for the last 11 years. There is probably 30 other people that live on that block that have been. It is an established neighborhood. I think some of us are highly concerned about the fact that we've been there. I've been there 11 years, and I think there's some that have been there over 30. And it is a structured. It is a neighborhood that's actually has grown and has maintained its integrity as a neighborhood. And honestly, there's somebody moving in that's transposing it that hasn't even lived there yet. It's being transposed. I think looking at the site plan, it just seems so compressed. At first, looking at it, it's yes, they're meeting the details that it's asking to make this a quote-unquote a farm, but everything is just so compressed and seems like it's all on top of each other. And it goes against the caliber of the things that I've been looking at. I've been out on 121 going into North Salem, and there's multiple farms, one after the other, that are adjoining with each other, where they have trails that they ride to each other. There's nothing that you can leave on this town, on this piece of property, to go to another piece of property with your horse. It is condensed, and in the future, what happens when there's other horses, and not to be cruel or anything, but they are replaced. What happens to the horses when there is more coming into there, and we're not, 5 years from now, this meeting is over, but things are changing right in front of our eyes, and we don't know how to cope with that.
Well, keep in mind that if something is granted, the applicant has to comply with those things. If they're not in compliance, then that would be a violation.
And then it would be up to us as homeowners to enforce it. Is that?
No, absolutely not. You would report the violation to town code officers, and then they would inquire and do an investigation, and then a determination would be made. If the applicant is in violation, they'd be issued a notice to correct the violation. If they don't correct the violation, then they're going to appear before a town judge. Keep in mind that if we put a condition on the property, such as no business or whatever it may be, if the board decides to do that, that's a condition of the approval of the application, and that has to be adhered to, not just for a week or a month, but
it has to be adhered to
in perpetuity. Absolutely.
And then one of the other obvious things that I've been, which I can never keep up with the way Dominic and Mike know the codes and everything. It's intensive, and they certainly got it down packed. And I think that the codes were written 40 or 50 years ago to maintain the integrity of something that already exists, or something that would like to have sustain its way of life, whether it be the town of Somers itself, or the park of Reese Park, or Lake Road, or Anna Rock as it sits right now. The decision that goes down, whether you decide tonight or 3 months from now, is like it's still going to be a code that was written 40 years ago, and it still has to be abided, not just tomorrow and next week or a year from now, it still has to be abided by in 50 years from now. And it kind of seems like the applications have got so many special variances and special applications to make this condensed property a farm, or so to speak, to make it work. And it just seems like it's not the proper piece of property to house the horses.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak in regard to this application? Okay, there's a gentleman coming from the back. I'm sorry. If you could just give us your name and address, please. No, please, at the microphone. So you have to give it at the microphone, sir.
Yep. I read an
Sir, give us
article-
your name and address
Jim
in the
Carney.
microphone so we can
Oh,
hear.
okay.
So it's for the
My name
record.
is Jim Carney. I live at 12 Anorak Drive. I
Thank
do
you.
have a concern about this. It's a health concern. I read in the papers that that horses, and there's been a lot of horses in the state of New York that are what do you call, that have West Nile virus in them. There's a vaccine for the horses, but there's not a vaccine for us. And if a horse gets bitten by, say, a mosquito that has that virus in it, the amount of time that it would take for that vaccine to work on the horse is time for the virus to multiply within the horse, in which case another animal or another insect could get infected and therefore spread the disease throughout the community. Since there is no vaccine for humans, I feel you should protect us. I feel that you would be responsible in a certain way, and the town would be responsible in a certain way to increase the number of horses in our town at this time until there's a vaccine for humans. So,
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
by the way, one more thing.
Sure, just go back to the microphone so we can.
You can carry the vaccine. You can carry the disease.
Sir, if you have any comments, please address them to the board, not to other members in the audience.
He's my neighbor, right?
Okay, but sir, this is not the place for that. Sir, if you can please give us your name and address.
Ed O'Connell, 5 Anorak Drive. This is my wife, Donna. I want to put some pictures up on the board so everybody can see what we're talking
Okay,
about.
we're going to try to limit the comments to about 3 minutes each, just so we can keep moving. Okay,
I don't like being up here, believe me.
okay, sure.
So, I'm up here as a Realtor for 22 years, and I just want to say that Ms. Jaquette's Realtor provided a
You could
letter
just
to you.
tap them above that, if you'll be fine.
Mr. Chairman, dated December 7th. You received a letter, and he provided examples of homes that are sold close to horse properties. I would like to refute for the record, because her Realtor stated, "I have looked for examples where the presence of horses has reduced property values, but sincerely, I cannot find any." He has attempted to use his own data, but to my contrary, I could not find one house he addressed that has increased in value with the horses in close proximity to homes. For starters, he's comparing the communities of Armonk and Bedford to our small neighborhood in Somers. Armonk and Bedford are totally irrelevant and don't want to waste your time, but I do have all the information here if you'd like me to leave a copy for you. What he considered comparable sales to 6 Anorak are not comparables at all. I'm not quite sure why he would have provided these comparables to the board. To me, they're very misleading, even to Ms. Jaquette. He should have never sold to that property, in my opinion. I would never have sold it to you. He included a home which sold in Armonk for $27 million, as Dominic already mentioned, on 32.87 acres in a multi-million-dollar neighborhood. This is not relevant. It has no bearing on our property. I researched all of the comparables he listed, the Realtor, and all had been reduced from when the homeowners purchased their homes and then when they last sold. Nothing her Realtor provided can demonstrate an increase in property value. The board needs to know that. Out of 13 properties that her Realtor mentioned in his letter, 11 of the 13 homes have sold for much less than list price, between $49,000 up to $2 million, less than list price. And these are all pretty around, a couple of years. 7 of the 13 homes located on main roads are dirt roads. One of the homes was sold in 1999. Why he threw that in there, I have no clue. It doesn't even make sense. It was 19 years ago. 7 of the 13 homes are in multi-million-dollar neighborhoods, not comparable to our neighborhood at all. One home sold for more than asking, but due to the lower price point, which was only $630,000. That's the only one that sold more out of 13 homes. One home in Armonk was listed for $27 million, sold for $27 million in 2014, but it's not comparable to our property. Horse properties are not desirable in a small neighborhood, and 6 Anorak's property is not conducive for horses and their well-being. In Bedford, these are the 3 that he mentioned in Bedford. Guard Hill Road sold for $47,500 below list price. The other one sold for $2 million below list price. On Bedford Road, a main road, sold for $5,000 below list price, but that was in 1999, should never have been mentioned. North Salem Properties on Norton Lane, dirt road with open meadows, sold in 2018 for $1,237,500, $257,000 below list price. The closest farm is River Horse, 0.8 of a mile away, our Vale Farm, which is a mile away. It's not across the street from my driveway. 24 Norton Lane on 22.5 acres, located on a main road, horse road, dirt road, 22 plus acres of unspoiled pastures. Last sold in 2018 for $3,350,000, $400,000 below list price. I don't know where this realtor thinks that our values are going to increase, and this is disturbing because it's inaccurate information that you've been given. I don't want you to read his comps. They're false and misleading. South Salem, he mentioned 16 Stewart Road on 1.25 acres, sold for $630,000. Armonk Properties, one sold for $550,000 below list price. That was in 2014, that's too far back. 2017, one house sold for $5,761,500 below list price. That was last year. It's currently on the market for $10,500,000 for 259 days. Initially listed for $11,500,000. It's down $1 million. Okay, so I don't know where they're getting this fact that my property values are going to increase. These are huge properties. I can tell you. Can you show them, please, those horse properties? The last
No,
one.
it's not necessary to show us pictures of the
Well,
property.
I would like to show the audience because they need to see.
Sir, you're out of order, please.
There were 3 Somers properties that her realtor
Ma'am,
mentioned.
I thought you said we're going to be 3 minutes. I'm going to have to limit the
Okay, are
comments.
you timing me? Because I'd like to know.
But to show us pictures of the properties, you could tell
But
us
he's
the
doing that
acreage.
while I'm talking. So anyway, so this is the
Ma'am, you
last.
have to wrap this up
This
pretty
is the
soon.
last thing I'm mentioning, so you're not giving me a chance to finish my statement, okay? I just want you to be aware, Mr. Chairman, that what you received is inaccurate, and I have to refute it.
You've made that very clear.
Okay. 3 Equestrian Park Drive is located in Heritage Farm. Primrose Farms and Heritage Farm is there. That farm has been there for 30 years. It's a world-class operation, has deep established ties to the equine industry, but most importantly, it has been there before the neighborhood was built.
I disagree.
Excuse me.
No, Arnie, if you want to say something, go right ahead.
Can I finish first, though?
No,
I don't
no,
really-
ma'am.
Go ahead.
You do not have the right to give a soliloquy here.
Go ahead, Arnie.
Okay, this is an ongoing discussion.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Arnie. What would you like to say?
Lolly Drive, when was Lolly Drive put in?
When was it built?
Primrose?
1999. This was built in 1979, the farm.
And
They were
stand
built in
corrected.
1999.
And it's been
Primrose Farms.
corrected.
Is that okay?
But, yeah.
Okay. So anyway, it's been there for 30 years. If I wasn't interrupted. Heritage Farm was a farm before the neighborhood was established. In fact, the neighborhood was established around the farm, which is the opposite of what is happening with 6 Anorak Drive. 23 Adams Farm, the same neighborhood in Primrose Farms, just sold in 2018 for $1,041,000, $234,000 below list price. I'm just trying to make a point that there are no increased values because you live around a horse farm. And these are world-class horse farms. Stonewall Farm, I think, had 500 champion
But
horses
remember,
come out.
ma'am, one thing is, a list price is one thing, but of course, any profit on a house is what you purchase it and what you sell it for.
I have all those facts if
Just
you'd like to
because
see it.
just because you list it and it sells below listing, almost every home sells below listing. So I don't know that that is a good comparison that you're making if you're trying to make the point of decreasing property values.
Well, I think the real estate sales have decreased a little bit this year. I mean, you know, the
Overall market.
The overall market.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Nothing her realtor provided can demonstrate an increase in property value. That is what he was trying to demonstrate. That is what I'm trying to refute. That's my point, being here as a realtor for 22 years. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Okay? I don't want you to think that, because she believes it. It's not happening. Our property values aren't going to go up $1 million because she puts $500,000 into hers. We put $250,000 into mine. My neighbors built a beautiful pool with a gorgeous patio, $250,000 in theirs. We don't care what the neighbors are going to increase their values by, but we're not getting there with the horses because you're limiting the number of buyers who will buy my property or the surrounding properties. That's the key right there. Also, as far as your accessory apartment, I don't believe that you have ever approved an accessory apartment above a barn where horses were below and a human living above. And I think you should look back at your records on that because I don't believe that that ever happened. So aggravating. I hope you do the right thing and deny the application to allow horses on this inadequately sized property. Bibbo and Associates should also be ashamed.
Okay, ma'am, I'm going to ask you to wrap up now so we can get to other members of the audience, please.
I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
That's a lot to absorb.
This is a lot to, and it was a lot of research, believe me. Because we want to make you understand, because I don't feel you understand. And it's really unfair to the neighbors in my neighborhood. This is one farm, Limelight Farm, Bedford Hills, Guard Hill. This is one of her
Ma'am, you
neighbors.
have to speak in the microphone,
This is
but...
one of the comps that her realtor comped a property to. We're not talking about her little acre property that 6 horses are going to be on. This is Heritage Farm, 40+ acres. This is not her farm. You cannot compare her farm to these neighbors. This is the only last thing I want to show you. This here. This is our street. This is her front lawn. The horses are going to be here. This is her steep slope.
Ma'am, all of us have visited the property.
Where's the other? I want the audience. I'm here for the audience as well.
Ma'am,
This is, what?
ma'am, you're well beyond the 3
This
minutes.
is the other.
Ma'am, we're going to
excuse me.
wrap this up. You've
I'd
been
like-
going for 10 minutes at this point in
Excuse me, I have
time.
one more thing to say.
Ma'am,
Excuse me. I'd like to-
ma'am, you have to
She's
wait
giving me
to your
her
order.
time. She's giving me her time.
You can't give time. This is not kindness.
It's like the Senate. Okay, this here is Joquette's home.
Donna, talking to the mic.
Oh, the O'Connell home.
Okay, ma'am, come on, we have to wrap this up.
The O'Connell
We may have
home
20 other
and the
people who want to
Humphreys
speak.
home. So you
Ma'am,
see
you are
how
being
close-
disrespectful to everybody here. Come on, let's move on. We understand your point. You keep going over and over again.
I want to just know how long I've been up here. Can you tell me that?
You've been over here for over 15 minutes.
15?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think so.
I know so.
Was it 15, Lynn?
Thank you, ma'am. Certainly, have you been over 3 minutes?
I don't know. Was somebody up here after 4? I don't know. I just want to have an idea.
Thank you, ma'am.
What we're expecting.
In closing, I would just like to, put my 2 cents in. I've observed this whole thing, and from the beginning, I honestly feel as though we've been against the board. It seems like the board is pro-applicant. And, when you read the code, you follow the code, you try to abide by rules.
The board adheres to the code and grants reasonable relief from the code consistent with what we've done in many, many years.
All right.
Many years here. That's what we try to do.
As long as you
Thanks,
follow
sir.
the code, I don't think there should be a problem there.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak into regard to this application? Let me just finish with the audience, sir, then I'll let you speak. Okay. Sir, please give us your name and address, and I'm going to ask that we limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Never mind.
Oh, you're not?
Oh, you're not coming?
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak in regard to the application? Sir, if you could please come up and...
180 seconds.
Okay, sir, the time is 9:25, I'm sorry, 9:35.
180 seconds.
Okay.
4 meetings.
Oh, please give us your name and address, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, my name is Steve Miller, 22 Anna Rock Drive.
Yes.
We're now in the 4th meeting. We're all tired.
I heard that. It kind of comes down to tangible, intangibles in any board decision. I think the tangibles, the 1992s, the setbacks, the steep slopes have all been well addressed here by numerous people, a lot smarter than me. What hasn't been addressed is the intangibles. So a little bit of the code intangibles comes into that you do have the authority to send this to the planning board if it's considered a significant site plan project.
This is not a project that, this is not an application that's appropriate for the planning board.
Well, in the previous meeting, I was told that only the town board can, only the town engineer can do
This
that.
is not a planning board matter, this is a zoning board matter. I can tell
In
you,
the
these are
code,
all zoning board issues. This is not a planning board issue.
But you do.
I mean, I can have town council give you.
In
some
170, paragraph M, I believe it is, says you may, if you feel it's significant, if there's extra sewage and site plan approvals, and this is a growing plan, you have you can put a condition on the approval to the planning board. A condition, not just automatic. But the real intangible comes down to the neighborhood. No one on this board is more qualified than the people who live in the neighborhood to define the character of the neighborhood. Nobody, except for the people who already live there. We've lived there, most of us for years, myself for 25. It's not only a change of the neighborhood to me, it's a new definition of the neighborhood. This was a quiet, sleepy cul-de-sac. And it turned into a street with the horse farm. That's a significant change to every one of us. All 39 people who have signed the petition that you didn't want admitted today, but maybe we'll adjourn, it'll be a petition for the next meeting. That's the intangibles, and I think that's all, it's so hard to put in a finite condition on, but it's the way we feel. And that's my 180 seconds.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak in regard to this application? Yes, ma'am? If you could just give us, once again, your name and address.
My name is Patricia Humphreys, and I live at 4 Anorak Drive, adjacent to 6 Anorak Drive. My written statement stated November 20th were submitted to the board secretary on December 7th, and you all should have received a copy. According to statements made by the members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I believe by your attorney, Mr. Riley, the applicant, as of right, can have the keeping of 2 horses on their property as set forth in 17011. However, if you view section 17011 through the lens of the long-established minimum requirement of area needed for a horse of 1 acre, then section 17011 is interpreted as a minimum requirement of 2.75 acres of land for use by the horses. Not total land use, not total land, not total property, but use by the horses. Therefore, with this interpretation, the applicant has not met the first threshold established in 17011, which states, I quote, "On any lot of not less than 120,000 square feet, the harboring of domestic animals, which shall be limited to horses, etc., must not exceed 2." End quote. The word harbor is a rather unique word. It means give a home or shelter to, also be the home or habitat of. With that interpretation, that meaning, then the 2.75 should be the habitat, the home of the horses. In my written statement, I establish many sources for the 1 acre requirement. The standard was recognized by the village of Mount Kisco. They stressed, in addition, that the owner should have suitably developed land for use by the horse. You do not have suitably developed land of 2.75 acres for use by horses.
And if you go back to up to the town of Patterson, which obviously has horses, they make it clear that when you have a horse, you should have 1 acre of usable land for the horse. So everybody's concerned about land to be used by the horse. Not total land, land for use by the horse. A Ms. Krishona Martinson, an equine extension specialist, put it quite well when she wrote that 2 1-acre size pastures should be sufficient for rotational grazing of 2 adult horses. And horses always graze. That's what they do. You say they're not going to eat out there, they're going to. That's what they do. Rectangular shaped pastures tend to better suit horses as they encourage exercise. Irregular shaped pastures should be avoided because they create a greater risk of injury. If the pasture is to be used for year-round grazing, at least 2 acres per horse is needed. Please note, I don't know if you've seen the site plan and you've seen the paddocks, but they are irregularly shaped. They are not rectangular. They kind of wobble around that line. Ms. Martinson was writing about how to plan a horse pasture for the U.S. Cooperative Extension System, which is funded by the USDA. The standard, the 1 acre per horse, is supported by the USDA, the Cornell University Cooperative Extension, the Maryland Department of Agriculture, the New York Natural Resources Conservation Service, the University of Rhode Island Cooperative Extension, Penn State Extension, among others, as noted in my statement. Once again, I'm stressing, the threshold of 2.75 acres in 17011 is for use by the horses. If the applicant does not have sufficiently usable land for even 2 horses, how can the board possibly grant an exception for 6 horses? The applicant has a concept, a dream, that of a horse farm for 6 horses. But it should not be executed. It should not be made into reality. This is the wrong site. The current trend in real estate is for rural areas to become more developed with greater population density, to turn farmland into residential or commercial property. The board seeks to reverse this trend and turn a residential area into farmland. It just cannot be done. It should not be done. There is no turning back the clock, on top of which there may be no way that that bit of property that the applicants wish to use for horses can be used or defined as a horse farm. It's just too small. I wish to point, I'm going to ignore this part. It's well recognized by the insurance industry that the storage of hay in a barn is a fire hazard. To put an accessory apartment in a barn where hay is stored is considered an additional liability by insurance companies. The applicants have finally realized that hay is a fire hazard and have finally added a 3,000-gallon water tank to their 3rd, 4th updated site plan. I have not seen reviewed a building schematic that shows more than one way for the apartment inhabitant to leave in case of fire. You should have more than one exit. Maybe there is, I haven't seen it, or if it's safe enough. Unlike the towns of North Salem or Bedford, the town of Somers does not contain a large number of horse farms or facilities, and I'm sure you have not seen that here too much. Maybe one in how many years? It does contain many, many residential homes and condos. For this board to set aside a whole slew of laws within the Somers Code and allow the applicants to set up a horse farm in a half-century-old one-family residential area is to establish a dangerous precedent, which in the end could prove destructive to the well-being and interest of the residents of the town of Somers. You're saying forget the law. It doesn't matter. Are we lawless? Is that what we are? We were without laws? It doesn't matter what the law says? I'm sorry. Then you're saying anybody can do anything. That's not right. I feel like I'm in the middle of an experiment. One part is to see how many laws can be set aside. Another's a real estate part, to find out if a horse farm can impact the value of adjacent property. And I believe Mrs. O'Connell stated quite clearly that it impacts surrounding properties negatively. I ask once again that you do not approve any of the applications. They're inappropriate for the property. They're inappropriate for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else from the public who wishes to speak in regard to this application? Okay, sir. Applicant have anything additional they'd like to add at this point in time?
First, it's a laundry list of items that have been raised before you. If any of the board members have any questions on any of these that I might not hit, please let me know. But I think a couple of broad comments. Your Somers Code, and again, I don't mean to be lecturing it all to the board. I just think it needs stating. Your code is not Mount Kisco, it's not Patterson. We're town attorneys in Patterson. I know what it says up there. We're dealing with our code. It doesn't say 1 horse per usable acre. There's a strict standard. Town board's made a determination that this use is appropriate for this area. As was stated before, if the town board deems it appropriate to change it, then they should be petitioned and they can change it. I'm sitting here getting the feeling that we're talking about a monstrous horse farm. We're talking 6 horses. For the most part, they'll be retired horses, cared for by a veterinarian. And to cut right to the quick of one of the other comments, this young lady here is the intangible. This is the intangible, who's going to be living here, making her home, just like everybody else did, and bought a piece of property that was zoned for a special permit use of 1 horse per acre. She's proposing roughly half of what your zoning code allows. That's the intangible, okay? List prices, selling prices, those are simply things that we can all play with. Eric Rosenfeld, who submitted the letter in support of the market values of properties, is here. He's been jumping up, peppering me to be able to say something. I'd like to ask if he could have a minute or two to respond to the real estate side.
He could speak, sure.
There are a couple of threshold issues that I think, we need clarity on. We believe this is a type 2 action. It's been stated to the board previously. This is not, we believe, a matter that rises to the level of a site plan review. Section 274B of town law specifically authorizes the grant of area variances to vary any special permit requirements. It's a clear provision, and we've submitted it, we've referenced it in our papers. That's the law of the case here. It's area variance standards, not use variance standards, that govern the grant of the variances. Again,
We have spoke to town attorney about that, and he is in agreement with it.
appreciate it. There are comments about Bibbo Associates designs and how this is being shoehorned. I'm at a loss because I don't want to make any personal comments about these things. The objectors have not submitted anything but conjecture. They are assuming that beautiful horse fencing and a couple of beautiful horses sitting across the property from their homes is going to adversely impact things. My grandkids would be over there feeding apples to the horses, okay? So that is why the use is a special permit use in a residence district. It is not a sewage treatment plant. It's not a 50-horse stall facility. It's consistent with the neighborhood. Our professional engineer has designed the site and is going to have to submit detailed plans on every aspect of this plan, on drainage, on septic, on the design and the location of fencing and the like. Bibbo Associates should be commended for taking a piece of property of 11.5 acres with significant constraints as far as slopes and be able to fit on it a project that complies with your code at half the density that would otherwise be permitted. So to disparage their design, I don't know if it's insulting to Tim, but it insults me for having this up here. This plan's been proposed, it's going to be subjected to review. To imply that your laws are not going to be followed insults town departments. This will go through an extreme amount of scrutiny, and every little thing has been addressed. To imply that this board has done something wrong by prolonging an application. We're only here again because the objectors raised issues about the project, just like the other applicants who've been before you. We recognized that there was a deficiency in the application that Dr. Joquette prepared herself without the need of an attorney, without the need of an engineer. She prepared it. Deficiencies were found. She had to hire a lawyer. She had to hire an engineer. She's spending thousands of dollars on a 6-horse property that could be going into fertilizer and feed and fencing. So to imply that this process has been prolonged because of some type of desire on the board to see this project go forward or to ignore laws or to grant variances, I have to say is insulting. It's the only thing I can say. I just don't have it in me not to. So I recognize this for what it is. Residential district, 6 horses, owned by the applicant, who's living on the property, who's a veterinarian. Now, I'd like Kayla to speak if she's of a mind to, okay? Because the West Nile virus isn't going to be running rampant around Anorak Drive because horses are there. Should we eliminate horses from the earth? Okay? If you would, Kayla, some of those technical things, because I think it is important for the record, Mr. Chairman, to have it and to address some of these things. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Please just give us your name and address for the record. Of course.
I'm Kayla Choquette. I live at 6 Anorak Drive. I'm open to any questions anyone has about horse health or anything. An appropriately vaccinated horse becomes a dead-end vector for West Nile disease. So if an infected mosquito does bite a horse, the horse does not become infected and then cannot serve as a vector to spread disease. So, I'm a vet. I'm pretty stringent about vaccinating my own horses. So, I don't know what to say.
You don't see that as a risk, obviously.
It's a decreased risk. It's, if they were to bite the deer that, eats all of our grass and vegetable gardens, that deer can then pass the disease, but a vaccinated horse stops the passage of the disease. This can't be a business. There's no riding ring. There's no trail. There's not, my horses can't live on grass 2-acre paddocks because they have a disease that's similar to diabetes and they would die. They literally, that's why I think the plants that everyone's has seen, there's, these little covered areas off of the stalls that they can go in and out to get exercise, and then they go out to the grass for 2 or 3 hours and they come back. I mean, it literally would kill them to be on 2 acres of pasture. Their feet would literally fall off of their body. And, the indication that I'm going to create these manure-laden cesspools, I mean, I just can't understand where that's coming from. It's my home. It's just an area for the horses to go out and be horses for a little while and then come back and be in their stall. It's anything else, any questions or concerns people have, I'm more than happy. I don't know what else there is to say.
Any other questions you have of the applicant at this point in time? Anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of clarify, maybe help clarify it in the sense of being a farm. It's not so much like being a farm, it's more so being like a hobby?
It's my hobby, yeah. I mean, I only have one horse that's capable of being ridden. All the others are retired. And she's boarded in North Salem where there's an indoor riding ring. She's going to stay there. This is just for the retired guys, or God forbid she were to become injured. There's not even going to be riding. It's just, they're literally my pets. I know they're odd pets but that's it. In the past, I have, my horse that I ride, I bred, so I had her since she was born. So, maybe when another one dies, I might have a baby horse that lives there until he's ready to be ridden, but then he goes off the property to be ridden, or she, or whatever. I don't want to set an age limit on what age horse can live on the property, but literally there's nowhere to do anything. I jump jumps and ride in a ring, and we're not going to put a ring. The change, I know there's been some criticism for the changes of the plan, but that was all done just to compromise with the town engineer to try to make everyone happy because he was getting so many complaints. I wasn't changing the plan because I wanted something different. Tim and his team made a plan for what made sense to, where the septic should go and all that. And then the town engineer said, well, let's do this. So we did that. And then that didn't make some people happy. So then he said, well, what if we do this? And I said, okay. So we did a new plan. I'm not changing the plan to try to get around requirements or try to trick anyone. The town, Steve called me in and said, well, can you do this instead so it looks better? And I said, sure.
Before you purchased the property, you had a discussion with the building inspector regarding
Several.
the use of the property, right?
Yes. Yeah, I didn't want to put an offer in on a property. The only reason we bought this place was so that I could have my mom move out here with me and we could have our horses. The place was empty. It really needs to be gutted. We're working on it. But the only reason we got it was for the land and for the use for the horses. It was empty and for sale on and off.
And the building inspector informed you that this zoning allowed for
Yes.
the horses?
Yeah. And, with the special exemption use.
Mm.
And I know there's an argument of how many exceptions I need, but if it were just the horses, if it wasn't for my mom, there would only be one.
Right.
So the other ones are all just related to the apartment. And, I know Don.
And anything above 2 is where you need the
Exactly.
permit for the horse.
Right.
2 as of right, and then above 2 you would,
Need the special exemption use permit.
right, then we have to determine.
And I know Don has mentioned a caretaker, and he's just trying to protect me as a good lawyer. But my mom was at the last meeting. We didn't discuss the case. Got adjourned. She lives 4 hours away, so she couldn't come this time. But she's real. She really wants to come out here, and I'm really not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes.
And the conditions that your lawyer had spoken about regarding that, if the board were to grant approval, that, the apartment can't be rented out to anybody,
Yeah.
there can't be a business run on this property,
Yeah.
you're not gonna be leasing out stalls, there's no
Anything.
business activity
I
going on.
just
This
wanna
is a
be able-
residential neighborhood, right?
Yeah, I just
Right.
want to be able to keep my pets on my property. And I know, there's a steep slope, but the top of that slope is beautiful and flat, so, it's not all slope. I take my dog up there walking several times a week, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. Any other questions of the applicant at this point? Okay.
Yeah, I do
Sure.
have one question. Okay, now, the horse manure is going to be put in a container.
Yeah.
All right, how often do you estimate that this would be removed to eliminate maybe any odor or anything of that nature?
As much as needed. I think town codes is once a week. It either has to be covered by 1 inch of dirt or removed from the property. So,
Yeah, town code lays out certain guidelines as to
Yeah.
what you would have to do.
yeah.
Yeah, I think Arnie, to that question, there are.
Tim, could you just go up to the microphone, give us, if you could just give us, just give us,
Just talk about the order, what they put into the manure to control the order. I believe it's available.
Oh, yeah. As mentioned, my horse is at a commercial facility and it's 30 acres and they have like a 18-wheeler dumpster of manure 20 feet from the barn and I never smell a thing. Maybe I'm nose blind, but you would think 30 horses worth of manure would smell pretty rank if it was that close. And, this is going to be such a smaller, we're not getting the special exemption sticking 6 horses on there. It's just that we just want to be covered for whatever might happen in the most ever we would ever want would be 6 because of the 6 stalls. If I had been better about knowing what I was supposed to apply for, this would have all been applied for right away. It was my mistake. I'm not a lawyer, obviously.
right. Any other questions? Okay. All right, sir?
With regard to the property values, Eric Rosenfeld, who's the broker who submitted a letter to your board, would like to say a couple of things.
If
we
you could,
could,
yes,
appreciate it. And I think he heard the 3-minute rule.
Yes, sir, if you could give us your name and some comments, but yes, we're trying to not go.
I can do
long
this.
term. Okay.
2 minutes. Eric Rosenfeld,
I'm the offending real estate broker. And I really don't want to be the person to conclude this meeting because, you know, my comments don't have anything to do with code, and I think the meeting and the ongoing series of meetings are all about code. But, you know, my little piece of this, I was asked to provide an answer to a question: does the presence of horses diminish the property values? It was not a question, does it increase them? The question my letter was addressing was, does it diminish them? So there's a lot of different ways to try to go at that answer. I just picked one to try to provide some examples to the board. There's not lots and lots of examples in any one town in our area within a year or several years' time, so I went out to surrounding towns as well as Somers. And what I came up with they are not comps. They have not, the properties in Armonk are not comparable to Kayla's property in size and price or anything. Why were they there? Because they demonstrated the fact that the presence of horses did not diminish the value of their property. So when somebody's willing to go spend $500,000 or $1 million or $27 million, just an example of the fact that they didn't have a problem with the presence of horses being nearby. The ones I submitted, I just picked a method. Every single one of them was either at or above the average sale price in that given town. So it was just a way to try to demonstrate that presence of horses didn't diminish the value of a property. Thank you. That's it. The fact that you have an example that's sold below list, as you pointed out, there's lots of different reasons for that. So I hope that clarifies that.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
At one point. Thank you.
So if any other questions, Mr. Chairman, please let us know. I know there's a lot covered, but I really believe that this meets code requirements. The deviation from the code relates entirely to the accessory apartment, which I think is a beneficial thing for the property, as we've discussed. It's certainly a beneficial aspect of it as far as the intangibles are concerned. And I think you have a project before you that is less intense than it otherwise could be, and is just exactly what the code provision sets it out to be, which is a special permit use in the district that your board's had a chance to analyze and take a look at. So we encourage the board to approve the special permit and variance requests. And clearly, all the conditions that we've talked about and included in our papers are clearly part of what we would propose.
If the board were to approve various parts or all, or whatever part of this, these conditions, of course, would be a part of that.
Yep, I believe it's an essential part of the application. Thanks.
Right. Getting cold. It's a little cold, man. Okay, sir, yes, if you'd like to come up and speak, please give us your name and address. Please, I'm just going to ask you to keep it to 3 minutes.
10 minutes, 15 minutes.
I generally give the attorneys, if you want Mr. Caruso to speak some more, I try to give the attorneys a little bit more leeway because they provide more input as far as code, but we're trying to move this along, that's all.
I appreciate that fact, and I'm respectful of it. All we're asking for is an even-handed adjudication of this problem. My name is Marlo Humphreys. My wife Patricia and I have lived for 31 years at 4 Anorak Drive. 5 after. I've already submitted a comprehensive written statement explaining in detail why the demands of the applicants of 6 Anorak Drive should not be granted. It was fully annotated with footnotes and an appendix. It showed that the applicant's demands for an accessory apartment violate basic health standards set by the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University. This is the applicant's very own veterinary school and is based on surveys of horse farms in the USA, not Europe. This is a fact. It is not conjecture. It has already been repeatedly shown by others that at the municipal or town level, the Six Anorak Horse Farm, be it profit or not for profit, horse farm will violate multiple statutes of the Somers zoning code. It will also violate the Somers Comprehensive Master Plan that sets the standards for stormwater runoff and aquifer contamination. And it will certainly violate the Somers Aging in Place policy. Those are simple facts, not conjecture. In addition to those violations at the municipal level, there are violations at the state and federal level. The proposed horse farm and accessory apartment were shown to be contrary to the specific regulations mandated for phosphorus and nitrogen for Somers by the New York State DEC and the warnings of the dangers of public health from the New York State Department of Agriculture and the CDC, or the Center for Disease Control of the U.S. government. This horse farm operation puts surrounding neighbors at risk with their aquifers, as well as to the diseases from not just horses, but as well rats and other vermin. This has been clearly explained and documented in my written statement. This debate before the ZBA is arguing legal issues, but arguing that while ignoring the medical health and well-being of our residential community. Surely our medical health is as important as our property values. In summary, the horse farm will violate long-established guidance set down at the municipal, state, and federal levels of government. Finally, I would add that the repeated demands for squeezing a horse farm, or shoehorning, as they wish to say, squeezing a horse farm, shoehorning it into Anorak Drive is a clear violation of basic standards for the application of the frequently discussed as of right privileges. It is simply wrong to submit to the demands of one household who haven't yet moved into their house and thereby discriminate against the many already well-established households of the neighborhood. Legally speaking, we all have the right to freedom of speech, but no one has the right to yell fire in a crowded movie theater. Likewise, the rights we are given as of right are not absolute rights to run roughshod over one's neighbors and the character of their neighborhood, or their community. The taking away of monetary value of my property and that of other residents is really just theft by another name. The character of an individual is reflected by how an individual behaves on a daily basis. Likewise, the character of our neighborhood is defined by what happens on a daily basis. The proposed horse farm operation will unquestionably change our residential neighborhood character due to the constant noise from trucks, repeatedly hauling horses, hauling manure, hauling feed, and hay up and down Highview Terrace and Anorak Drive. But it is not just the noise and traffic that is a problem. The applicants would have us believe that their horse farm operation will be invisible since they are cutting down trees to insert their horse barn and 3,000-gallon water tank behind their house. Yet at the same time, they are also placing their two separate 1/2-acre horse corrals surrounded by 3-rail fencing directly on to Anorak Drive. Are we to believe, as in the parable of the emperor and his clothes, that the emperor has clothes or does not have clothes? Which is it? Are we expected to ignore the 2 horse corrals on Anorak Drive and believe that no horse farm operation exists? I'll end by saying those who are governed by the laws of a town have the right to expect that those who govern will govern fairly and follow both the spirit and letter of the law. That's all we are asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else wish to speak in regard to this application? Okay, anything further from the applicant at all? Okay. Then we'll try to wrap this up so we can kind of go to board discussion.
Two quick things. I don't think Kayla should be prejudiced by the fact that she hasn't lived there for a number of years. She's bought a piece of property in reliance
Speak
on
up
the
a little
code.
bit louder, please.
I don't think that Kayla should be prejudiced because she's only just recently bought this piece of property. She bought it in reliance on the code, which is really the rubric for when someone buys a piece of property. Also, all of these studies that were just referenced by Mr. Humphreys, I do a lot of work with horse farms. I do a lot of work with large horse farms and departments of agriculture and market opinions and holdings on horse farms where there is such great latitude given to farms of significant size where they simply would never get that type of treatment if all of these horrors were something that would come about from a farm. This, if anything is mismanaged on this farm, if there are problems, you have a code enforcement officer who will answer a call one day and they will be told that there are issues. You have provisions, specific provisions in your code, which has been much maligned tonight, about renewing special permits. If there are issues, you're going to know it very quickly. So I think all of those potential problems are ones that are easily controlled and managed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think we should have a motion to close the public hearing at this point in time.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Second.
Is that Arnie and Tom?
Bill?
Artie and Bill.
On all the applications.
Yes, this is on for all the applications. Then we're going to vote on all three applications here. There's three items, but there's four applications. Yes, that's correct. We're going to, all the items have been addressed.
There's someone who wants to speak still.
Okay, I asked if anybody else wanted to speak in regard to this application, and no one said anything. I did that. We've already made a motion to close the public hearing. We're going to vote on it.
He had his hand raised.
Where?
He is hard of hearing.
We're closing the hearing.
Yes.
Okay. Let's take, do we have to take a vote on the closing of the hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Denise, if you could call the roll.
Let me ask you one question. When are you going to vote on this?
We're going to vote on it right now.
Oh, that's why I want to come up.
For what?
Because I feel, let me come up.
Sir, we've already closed the hearing on
That's
this.
right.
The hearing aid.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I mean, I ask if there's any more people.
You know me, right?
Yes, Mike. Okay, excuse me, everyone. I recognize Mike.
You know,
After-
well,
Let me,
tell you something.
boy, you asked me something, Michael,
I'm going to make a statement that there's people on your board that are partisan, okay? Why they are partisan? Because they're involved with horses. You don't want me to speak? Maybe we'll sue.
Okay,
Thank you.
sit down.
Sir, keep in mind, anybody who doesn't like a decision of this board, you can file an Article 78 proceeding with the New York State Supreme Court. So there is always an appeal level that you can go to if you don't like the decision of the board.
Why make us
So,
go there?
thank you. Ma'am,
You deny-
listen, if we have to adjourn this meeting, we will adjourn this matter and everybody can come back next month. We're here every month. I am not going to tolerate people speaking out of turn. We try to have an orderly meeting. We try to give everybody the opportunity to speak. But if we can't have an orderly meeting, I'll just adjourn this matter and we'll come back next month. We're trying to get it resolved. The board has looked at 1.5 feet of documents. We have met with legal counsel in executive session. We have gone through the law and the code extensively. I can't imagine how many hours this whole board has spent regarding this matter. Okay? We're going to follow the zoning code, but the zoning code And our purpose for being here is to give reasonable relief from the zoning code. And that's something that we look at and consider. And we've heard all this information and we're doing the best we can. We're all residents of Somers, as I have said before. Denise, please take the vote for closing the hearing.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harding?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Please keep in mind, it takes 4 votes to pass any measure that we're going to take a look at. Okay, so let's start with item number 7 that is before us right now. This is an application for the special exception use permit to construct the accessory apartment, okay, which always requires a special exception use permit. Any apartments that come before us, accessory apartments, we have to basically approve that special exception use permit. We do that all the time. This apartment has a second issue in that this would be a building constructed after 1992. Normally, we're not allowed to condition special exception use permits. If it meets the criteria, it's generally granted. But if it's built after 1992, we can put conditions on as to, for example, who would reside there and things of that nature. So do we want to have some discussion? Maybe we should just go down the line and just have everybody give me your comments or concerns or questions or anything else. We'll have an open discussion about this. Anybody want to start?
Sure, I'll start.
Okay.
My concern about approving the special exception use permit for the accessory apartment is that it does require several exceptions, as well as my problem with that is that it requires 2 exceptions.
That it's built after 1992. Right.
Right.
And there's a second special exception use permit for the horses, but we're not to that yet. Right now, we're just deciding on the apartment and the construction after 1992, and if we would provide any conditions upon it. So,
Really, the only conditions that I would highly recommend is to have a family member there or stable help, not to be rented out to the general public.
Bills, what's your comment on this?
Well, my comment on this is I personally wouldn't live in the apartment. And coming from the city, it's rather strange for me to think of that, but I guess I've only been up here 20 years. That's not enough time. But I would support the apartment if Kayla has somebody that wants to live there. I would, like Arnie, I would limit it to the family. I would not make it a rentable apartment. And I would limit it to the family or people that are working in the horses, with the horses.
Yeah. Umberto, what's your feeling on this?
I really, at this time, I would go with the majority of the vote. I mean, it's just,
Your comment,
excuse me?
yeah, okay. Melissa, your comments on this?
I'm inclined with regard to the accessory apartment to grant the application. We typically grant these applications for accessory apartments through the special exception use and variance. I too would condition that it not be rented out to the public, be limited to personal use or to extended family members. With those conditions in place, I feel that it would keep with the nature of a residential neighborhood.
Right. Yeah, my feeling is that in the past, special exception use permits are routinely granted. I mean, I remember when I first started on this board, I was concerned about these accessory apartments, that they would be complaints and issues. But I think over my last 15 years, I'm not sure there's been even one complaint about an accessory apartment, meaning that there's something improper going on there in all the 15 years. So, and the town code allows for these accessory apartments. Now, in the past, have we also approved special exception use permits for buildings constructed after 1992? We have, but we always put conditions on them. And a normal condition that we put is that, we usually limit it to relatives. That's what we normally do. In this case, I think I would be amicable to relatives and/or somebody who would be there for the care of the horses.
Provided the horses are approved.
Right, provided the horses are approved. Right, we haven't gotten to that yet. We're doing one step at a time here. That's exactly right. So, I mean, so.
I think
that would be my
also,
thought.
I also am further encouraged to grant it because of the review process. It's going to come before us every 7 years, or if there is going to be a change of ownership, and
Right.
we'll be able to find out at the review if there's been any violations.
Right. So, yeah, 7 years, the permits have to be renewed. Melissa makes a very good point here. If you sell the property, has to be renewed
Within 6 months.
within 6 months, right? If you sell a piece of the property, everything becomes null and void. And of course, if you violate the conditions we put upon it, then someone can make a claim, a complaint to the code enforcement officer, and then proper follow-up would occur. So all of those would be, from what I'm hearing of the board, the conditions upon that. So those would all be part of it. I may ask Mr. Riley to write this up in a resolution as we go through this to figure out all the pieces of this so that it's very clear for us, the board, and the applicant, so that a year from now, if there's questions or issues, we know exactly what was agreed to.
And if item number 7 is approved and item number 8 is not,
We're going to have to get to that.
okay.
Technically, we could be approving an apartment in a building where nothing else could go on, but I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. We have to take it one step at a time here. Right now, as of right, they can build the building. Whether they can build the building or not is not an issue before us. They can build the building. It's in the code. So the building itself can be built. A structure, an accessory building can be built. Okay, so let's first cover this. Let's have a motion as to the type of action.
Make the motion type 2.
Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion as to whether we're going to grant the special exception use permit and what conditions we might place upon it? Because the building was constructed after 1992. So we're also granting a special exception use permit, but if we do grant the permit for a building built after 1992, we're also granting an area variance for that. Do we have a motion?
I will make a motion to grant the special exception use permit with area variance for construction after 1992, with specific conditions that it not be used for any other renting purposes, and only for private, family, or, if permitted, caretaking of the horses.
Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Nay.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that item has been granted. We're going to go on to item number 8. Item number 8, which is continuation of this application, is an application for an area variance without the need for a ruling from an administrative officer pursuant to blah, 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 which prohibits the housing of domestic animals in a building used for human habitation. So as mentioned, the code prohibits the housing of domestic animals in a building used for human habitation. Do we want to have some discussion? Well, we have to have some discussion, of course, in regard to this. I guess I'll start off. I know of other structures in the town of Somers that there are barns with horse stables with people living above them. It seems to be a fairly common thing from clients I have it's a fairly common thing that I see in North Salem and Bedford and other towns. I understand that the code does have this preclusion, but I see it as being very common. So I'm apt to give an area variance for this item. I'd like to go through the board and just everybody tell me what they think.
Now, I will say that I have a granddaughter that's been riding over in South Salem.
Please, no comments from the audience.
All
You know,
right.
this discussion is basically amongst the board at this point in time, and it's done in front of the public so that there's a complete view of what we're thinking and what we're saying and what our discussion is. So we're trying to do that, you know, and I want to encourage board members to give me their true feelings on this so we can try to get to a good answer.
Okay. As I said before, I do have a granddaughter that rides in South Salem. She's been riding for over 16 years, okay? And I have very close friends who have horses, okay, that it's a standard practice of hired help, you know, living above the, or in the barn, or the stable. I'm sorry, ma'am? No, I will not.
Please, no comments from the audience. A recusal is someone, each member has to decide if they feel that they have to recuse themselves. Just because you know somebody that has horses. Okay, please, continue, Arnie.
No, I have no objection of having actually, I would not put my granddaughter in a situation of a non-health situation. That's my point I'm trying to raise. At the same time, it's a standard practice of people or hired help living with, you know, taking care of the animals in the barn, stable, to take care of horses. So I have no objection to that.
Who'd like to go next?
Given that this is listed as a specific criteria, I feel there was a reason it was put there, and so it should not be varied.
I'll go next. I understand the code provision. It prohibits domestic animals from living and being housed in buildings for human habitation. I do agree with one of the commentators of the evening that there is a distinction between domestic animals such as horses and household cats, dogs, pets of that nature. I also agree with the chair that our purpose here is to grant reasonable relief. In this regard, I'm inclined to believe the request is reasonable, and I would err on the side of granting the application.
Bill or Umberto, had any additional comments at this point in time?
No, I pretty much agree with Melissa. I personally find it a bit distasteful to have humans and animals living together, but my wife reminded me that we have a dog, and that my daughter has a ranch with a whole bunch of horses that she has living with her, and I checked with her on it, and I guess it's more acceptable than I have experienced in my life. So I think in this particular case, I will vote yay.
The only other comment I have is that, you know, when I look at, you know, other situations that I know of, you know, having somebody living above the horses, you know, is a significant safety issue for the horses too. I know there was a significant fire over in North Salem several years back where literally 10 or 12 horses were killed because the fire was there, and even though the resident was on the property, they didn't notice the fire until it was going, you know. Had somebody been living up there, you know, with proper alarms and things like that, you know, maybe something else could have been done, you know. Of course, you know, one concern I do have is to make sure that, you know, there's proper that we're, of course, complying with the code and that there's proper fire alarms and CO detectors and everything else that's required to be here. I don't know what, what fireproofing of the walls have to be. But that, I would leave that to town code. And Tom, that would be something that you would have to, of course, oversee to make sure they're complying with all fire codes and ordinances, for everybody's safety, obviously.
Now, I do have one question regarding the fire. Is there 2 exits?
They have to review their application and apply it to the state code at that time.
Right, whatever, because if there's a requirement for that, of course would have to be.
Area involved, there's a lot.
Right, because like I know, for example, like an accessory apartment in a basement or something, you have to have 2 exits. Usually an exit one into the house and then one outside. Generally, you have to have 2 forms.
Bedroom and then from the general.
Right, yeah, there has to be 2 forms of egress, yeah. So, here again, the applicant would have to comply with all required, obviously, fire code and other requirements, obviously. Any further discussion to be had regarding the variance requested for this item? Okay, can we have a motion of the type action?
I make a motion, type 2.
Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santaroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8 is granted. We then go to the.
No.
I'm sorry.
Not yet.
Sorry.
It's just getting.
Now, that was just clearing for environmental. Okay, now we have to have a motion as to whether we're going to accept, if we're going to grant the application, or put conditions, or not, or deny it, or put conditions upon it, if we grant it, I should say. Do we have a motion in regard to item 8?
I'll make a motion to grant the application with the condition that the only domestic animal be that of horses and no other nature.
Second.
Do we have a second? Okay.
Who was that, Arnie?
Yeah.
It was Arnie.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Nay.
Ms. Santaroni?
Aye.
Ms. Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're going to item 9. This is an application for a special exception use permit to keep up to 6 horses on the 2 properties located in the R80 residential district at 6 and 8 Anorak Drive. Does someone want to start, or want me to start on this one?
Please do.
All right, well, my position on this is 2 horses are allowed as of right as soon as you have 80,000 square feet, or an R80 district, 80,000 square feet. 2 horses are automatic. You can get them. Anything above that has the special exception use permit. If this was a perfectly flat piece of property, they could have up to 11 horses. So certainly I don't, because of the steep slopes, I think 11 would obviously be excessive. The issues of disease and things like that, I don't think this board is going to be prepared to disallow horses because of disease, because I don't know how any other horse application would ever come before us that we could look at. Are we basically then saying no horses allowed in Somers? And I don't really see clear evidence of that. I don't really see that as a reasonable argument. I know we all did a site visit and went there, and took a look at the property pretty extensively, walked the property. The day I was there, I was with 1 or 2 other members of the board, and I remember it raining a lot, and I was actually surprised that I didn't see any runoff or anything at all from the property. I thought I saw a couple little puddles here and there, and it had been pouring for quite some time. So I'm not I don't see that as an issue, but that's not really before us. I mean, as of right, they can have 2 horses. That's what this area is zoned for. They're allowed. Do I think the 6 horses are reasonable? I probably would. I would go along with the 6 horses. I think it's reasonable. It's far under the 11. That would be my position. Other members?
No, I have to go along with the chair in the sense of granting the 6 horse.
I think for me, in order to grant this, I would like to see the merger of the lots, just to grant it with the special exception use. I don't know that that is enough. I think I would want to see.
Against one. Shame on you.
Ma'am, you are interrupting this meeting.
Sorry. You are interrupting our lives. How dare you? We are hoping for representation from you. Shame on you.
All right, so let's just continue. Let's just continue on.
30 people against one. 30 years we have paid taxes.
You might have to.
What good are
You might have to.
I've lived here for 40
Might
years.
have to.
How dare you? I'm 83 years old. You're wrong, all of you. And because grandmother rides horses,
Out the door.
what to us? I have lived in Somers for 40 years. I built my house on that road. I'm 83. I sure as hell hope I wouldn't die and see this. But God damn it, I don't care if I do.
Good night.
Okay, so we'll continue.
Oh, we still talking about it. I agree with the 6 horses. I don't have a problem with it.
Melissa, do you have some more comments to make?
If that was a condition, I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that.
Well, yeah, one thing that the applicant did agree to was that, as a condition, that if either of the lots were to be sold, that our approvals here would be immediately null and void. Right, and that the 2 lots, the only reason you're getting this, that if we do consider giving you this approval, it's because of the 2 lots, because it's giving us the more acreage.
Yes.
And I think from a zoning perspective, please, it is merged.
Yes, that's what
Now, whether or not it has to be subdivided is not.
That's not an issue for us, right?
It is merged.
Yes, that's what
Because
I'm
it's
saying.
being used together. The fact that something is merged, you may have 3 or 4 tax lots. That has nothing to do with it. So it is, they are merging it by way of their application and the use they propose.
For purpose of what we're doing here.
You don't have to worry, the board doesn't have to worry about whether they can subdivide it in 50 years or 100 years. That's, who knows?
Right, that's for someone else.
Melissa's condition is, part and parcel of the application.
Okay, I think that's, I like that idea.
Okay.
Yes, because we're approving this because of
Yes,
all the
I want that
acreage,
to be clear.
not just a piece of it.
No,
When it was only one property, we may not have considered additional horses. Okay. Okay. Any other comments from Arnie, Tom? No. Arnie?
I mean, my concern is for the size of the property, and the usable space. Code does mention that we can consider terrain, so I think it's too much for that size property. Usable amount of property.
How many horses would you think would be reasonable to have?
Well, they're allowed 2, so somewhere between 2 and 6, but I don't know.
Okay. Be a little hesitant on the 6, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the other part of that is that I don't think it fits in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily think horses, it doesn't fit for me.
Okay. One other thing I will make mention of, if we're to grant the horses, once again, all the conditions enumerated, which I'm just going to state for the record, you said all horses would be kept on the premises shall be owned or leased by one or both of the applicants. Yep. There shall be no leasing of stalls, there shall be no leasing of horses on an hourly, daily, or other basis, there shall be no private or group lessons offered to the public, there shall be no outdoor illumination of paddocks, no outside loudspeaker systems, handling of manure, including its removal, shall comply with all town codes and county codes, absolutely. All feed shall be stored in rodent-proof containers. You know, obviously, I think it's quite obvious, but I'll just say it. This is not a business operation. This is not a money-making venture of any kind. You know, we don't expect the public to be coming here for anything for any reason. I mean, that would be a requirement for me in order to vote for, provide for the horses. Okay. Any other comments in regard to the horses? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the type of action.
Type 2?
Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harding?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Can we have a motion as to the application and what conditions we would put in regard to said to the motion?
Well, I'll move the motion and listing all of the exceptions that we've already noted as part of the motion.
Part of the conditions.
Right, part of the.
And are you making a motion for the 6 horses?
Yes.
Okay.
I second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harding?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Nay.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye. Okay, the motion's granted. Town Council, Jerry, I would request, a resolution on this whole thing so that everything is written up, documented very clearly, so we have that. I'm gonna probably take a little recess too in a couple minutes here, just so before the next one. Okay, so, this matter is now been voted on and resolved. Before we go to the last item on the agenda, since we've been going now for about 3 hours, we're going to probably take a 10 or 15-minute recess, and then we're going to address the last item. Okay, so people have a chance to use the bathroom or whatever. Okay? All right, we're going to take a brief recess. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, good evening once again, everyone. We're going to pick up the meeting again. It is now 5 minutes to 11. The date is December 18, 2018. We're going to continue with the last item on the agenda this evening, that of Anthony and Catherine Porco. This is an application for an interpretation under the town code of the town of Somers pertaining to a non-conforming commercial use in a single-family residential district. The board has heard significant testimony on this matter, and we've had significant documents in regard to this matter. We have received additional submissions from counsel for each side that we have also reviewed. The public hearing on this matter was closed last month, so now it's really just a matter for board discussion. I will make mention also that we did have a significant executive session with town council to pick his brains and get some legal advice so that we're basically on track to determine what we should be doing here. Since there's no public comment at this point in time, this is just a matter for us to discuss at this point in time and then make a decision on how we're going to proceed. So the applicant, Anthony and Catherine Porco, believe that there is a non-permitted use on the property. This is the Whispering Pines nursery is a pre-existing non-conforming use. And then this gets into the issue of, are they now in violation of what they are permitted to do on the property? And we'll go through the board and discuss this. The previous building inspector, Mr. Citarella, had determined that there was no violation on the property, and the Porcos appealed that decision, believing that he was in error and that Whispering Pines is carrying on activities that they're not permitted to do on the property. So maybe we should start discussing this a little bit. I don't know who wants to start. Maybe you, Melissa. I know that.
Sure, I'll start with discussing if we're looking at the issue of whether Mr. Citarella was correct in saying that there is no violation. After looking at all of the documents and all of the comment, and also looking at case law that was presented by counsel that is what I would deem binding authority. We have a case from City of White Plains, Amodio Garden, which is on point with very similar facts here, where a non-conforming use was not automatically enlarged or expanded simply by a mere increase in volume or using more modern machinery. And then we look at what Mr. Citarella said at one of our meetings, that we certainly have an increased volume, but to me, the question that hasn't been proven through evidence to the board is, to what extent? Do we have a mere increase in volume? Has a burden been met to a preponderance that there has been a substantial change in volume, increased intensity? And I would answer that the record lacks of evidence to support that. And given the lack of admissible evidence, we have to follow Amodio, that the processing is part of the sale, even though it's just a mere increase.
Yeah.
I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know the Amodio case was decided at New York Supreme Court, and then if I'm right,
The
Jerry,
appellate division.
that was then appealed
And affirmed.
and affirmed at the appellate division. All right. Okay. Comments from other members on the board, please?
Well, for me, I'm not looking at it from a legal point of view. We've heard an awful lot of, I guess, what I'll call testimony from the legal people, and they have been making a legal case about this. I think there is another whole side to it, and that's the business side of it, and I think that was overlooked by the courts in the decision of the Amodio case. I really believe that the Whispering Pines has become a large manufacturer of landscaping material. And to do that, they have brought in all kinds of stuff, and they've fixed mulch, and they've broken rock, and they've done a lot of things there. And I believe that they are now manufacturing where they were originally expected to be a distributor or a retailer. And I just, for the life of me, I can't settle myself that they're not manufacturing in a residential district. And they are. I'm not looking to put them out of business, but I'm looking to put them someplace where they can do their manufacturing appropriately to the area. So I feel that that's where I stand on it.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't disagree with that, but it comes down to the interpretation which seems to be widely held, that the manufacturing or processing of those materials is inherent in being a landscape supply business and selling those materials. So that would be a common practice.
Please, no comments from the audience, please. Arnie, your position on this?
Well, to start off with, I want to say this way. Start off this way. There's no winners and there's no losers. It's unfortunate that I feel that way. But I have to say, based on the previous building inspector, Ephraim, and finding that there's no violations to the code at that time, that there's no violations, I have to go along with what Melissa has indicated when she spoke a minute ago.
Umberto, you have any comments on this? No?
Again, if there are nuisance complaints, we're ruling on the activity itself. That there could be a separate matter, obviously, if there were dust or odor or noise violations. that would be outside of the scope of the permitted activities.
Yeah, you know, it's outside the purview of this board for those issues. I think the nuisance issues have to be addressed where the applicant is addressing them. They're going with a separate case to Supreme Court, New York State Supreme Court, to address that, and that suit is pending. So I think that's really where it has to be addressed. Yeah, the problem I'm having is that I don't know how to get past the White Plains versus Amodio case. It's almost identical in facts to this case. Even if we were to rule for the applicant, I think it would be overturned. I mean, I think that's really the situation we have before us. I'm hoping, though, that no matter what decision we make, you know, just because we come down one way or another, I still think there is room for both sides to somehow reach some kind of compromise, and I hope that they would do something in that vein to try to resolve it. You know, it's always better to resolve things than to go to court and battle these things out, because there's always going to be one side happy. We know one side's not going to be happy with this decision. So we have to base it on law as best we can, and that's what we have to do here.
Can we find out if they could move their, processing the stone and that?
To a different part of the, I mean, that would certainly be,
Is that possible?
I mean, that may be something that Whispering Pines.
Moving it away?
Yeah.
You can't make, this isn't,
can't
if it were a variance application, you can put conditions, but this is just whether, Mr. Cittarella's determination, I guess, on October 20th.
Yeah, could you move the mic closer? I'm sorry, Jerry. So if you could just start again, just so they.
Roberto, if this were a variance application like the previous case, then you can put conditions on it. But this is a matter of yes or no. Was Mr. Cittarella correct or incorrect when he said there were no violations, whatever day that was?
But I'm not saying there is a violation. I'm asking if they could,
I understand what you're asking. Can this board get involved in that? In this case, I would say no.
Oh, okay.
We could say it on the side that if they could move it someplace else, sure, that'd be great. It's just
Move
one
it
more way to
away so
resolve
they
the
can,
issue.
That's right now. That's between the two parties.
We can't broker
And
a
possibly Judge Lefkowitz, but not this board.
Right. Yeah, we're not
All right.
brokering a settlement here. That's exactly right. That's not our role here. Our role to,
All right.
So, yeah, sir, yeah, the public hearing has been closed on this. I mean, we're not gonna hear from either side on this anymore. Just like the last case, we have been looking at this for months. We have gone through reams of information. We've had extensive executive sessions with, town legal counsel, and we've gone through this so many different ways. We've hashed this out for hours and hours.
Right, I understand that,
But, sir.
just 1 second though, because the board is drawing very close parallels to a case that.
Sir, I'm really not going to entertain any discussions. Listen, like in any case, if you dispute, like you've done before, if you dispute our findings, an Article 78 proceeding can be filed. Can always go to an Article 78.
I'm only saying that if the board wants
Sir,
clarification, the
sir,
attorney and I are here.
Tom Tuma found two violations and shut him down. They did not Ephraim Citarella. Tom Tuma found 2 violations, shut him down.
Sir, please. Okay.
Now, I want to say this. It was very, very hard for me to come up with a decision of supporting our previous building inspector. My personal opinions are completely different than what I just said. And my heart goes out for you people. Well, I have to go by the town code too.
Well, then go by the town code.
I am.
You never had the
I am.
authority to do this. Never.
Okay?
Never.
We went through as the chair.
Amodio opened up in a
Okay, listen, we're
commercial
not going to have a discussion on
zone.
this.
They
I'm
moved
sorry.
from Mayapack to here, into a residential zone.
This board always attempts to follow the code, and that's what we're doing. And when we have settled law, especially that went to the appellate division, even if we were to rule in your favor, it'd be overturned.
Then let it be overturned.
But we're charged with not voting with our hearts or what we want to do. We have to follow the code, and that's what, to the best of my knowledge, the board will do. you know? So, that's it.
So then tell us what is the
Okay,
code.
any further discussion in regard to this? Any further comments or discussions at this point in time? Nope. Okay. I'll take a motion as to the type of action.
I'll make a motion type 2.
Denise, do we have a second for the type 2 action? Do we have a second? Hey.
Hey! Watch your mouth, will you?
Call me boy?
Well, you talk like a boy.
Please, there should be no discussion amongst audience members here. Hey, no discussion. Come on.
If they keep this up, I'm going home.
There should be no the discussion amongst the audience is not going to change any decision of the board. I'm going to tell you that right now. Okay, there can be no, please, let's have order. This is not getting anybody anywhere, all right? We're trying to make a decision here. The board, to the best of my knowledge, every member on this board has struggled with this mightily. We've all visited the site, we've been there, we've spent countless hours doing this. We're all volunteers. Sometimes I ask why, but we're volunteers for this. And we're doing the best we can, okay? And we're trying to follow the law as best we can. We're trying to follow the code. Okay, so we have a motion for a type 2 action. Do we have a second?
A second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr.
Yes, you can.
Santoroni?
Excuse me?
Aye.
Oh, no, I
This is
didn't.
type 2
Type
action.
2 action.
I'm gonna abstain.
You're gonna abstain?
Yeah.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye. Okay, do we have to have a motion? We have to have a motion now in regard to the application. We need 4 votes to carry.
Should we talk a little bit about how the motion should be worded so that we're very
Yeah.
clear?
Yes.
Well, the applicant is asking for an interpretation under the town code as to whether there's a violation on the property. So we would be voting whether we believe that there is a violation or there is not a violation.
Based
That they are
on-
not in violation of the code.
Or would we be voting that the building inspector's interpretation was correct?
Right, that's correct.
That would be-
That would basically, the building inspector said there was no violation. So if we say that there is no violation, that's in agreement with what the building inspector had originally decided on the property.
Okay, so I would like to make the motion based on the findings from Ephraim's notation on October 13th, 2017, that there are no violations on the property of Whispering Pine.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Tom, second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Nay.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Abstain.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye,
That's 4.
that's 4.
4 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 abstain.
That's correct. Okay, this matter is resolved.
This lady lives in 3 separate neighborhoods, 2 different towns. Nice job.
So we're going to conclude the meeting at this point in time. I will make mention that next month's meeting is the 3rd Tuesday in January, January 15, 2019. We could approve the minutes. However, I still have to review the minutes, so I'm not prepared to approve them yet, so we can wait till next month. I'm sorry about that. Have a nice day. Hey, hey, guys, cut it out. Cut it out.
What's wrong with you guys?
Stop it.
Stop. Please, come on over here.
Everybody be aware, this is all on camera.
Holy shit. I don't think they care.
Are we still on camera?
Still on camera. We're still on. I would ask that people please leave the room at this point in time.
Let's go.
Come on. I don't want to hear any discussion about this matter from the board. Okay.
Tell him to Tommy.
I think he is. He's on the phone.
He's on the phone, he's on the phone.
So you don't get anything out in the parking lot.
It's not right to make decisions, but you guys don't leave them.
Well, I think he's calling for more police.
Mr. Ford, he put his elbow in my face. Please. Yeah, you're excused. Tom, you shut him down. You went over, you wrote him 2 violations. You should stop working. In spite of what you said, you found violations. You shut him down.
Please, everyone, please leave the room. We're trying to wrap up. We're trying to wrap up the meeting.
Whoa.
That's not before us. Tom Tuma's findings are not before us.
That's correct.
We're not looking at what Tom Tuma did.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Okay, so I think at this point in time, we're going to close down the meeting. As I mentioned, next zoning board meeting is January 15th, which is the third Tuesday of 2019. We'll approve minutes at next month's meeting, and that concludes the meeting for this evening.